Just a short. That's why it's big. That's good. Yes. No. Yeah. Right.
I've got to call the chair.
There's a practice as well.
On the usher chair. I don't understand how they call it. That was what I'm doing.
Thank you very much. Oh, good. One fewer procedural conundrum to deal with today. Right. Okay, let's get going.
We resume debate on the review panel's amendment to P80, and next listed to speak, I have Deputy Gardner.
So, thank you.
Yes?
Can you hear me? Yes. Before I start the speech, I think that most of the people know my position as a member of the scrutiny review panel. And it's really important to emphasize that I personally strongly believe we need a new hospital. We have a site. We understand where we are going. And this debate purely about finances, establishing numbers. And I'll ask members to listen carefully, even most of the members might make their mind. I will struggle to include all reasons why I'm taking the position that I'm taking. There are many reasons and many numbers, and I'll do my best to be succinct, as it involves lots of numbers and days. I will not reference to incinerator and recent liquidation of and C. However, I hold them as previous example of previous poor fiscal management and fully expect other members to reference to them. But I would like to take members through our publicly available facts and numbers used to justify this huge expense. I will have 3 chapters. I'll promise be succinct. The first one, itemized cost of our outline business case follow-up presentation during the last 2 months. And there are 3 examples that created my confusion. First, size of the development. The outline business case proposed to develop a 67 square meter hospital launched on the 3rd of August. Later in August, the public hearing heard that it will be 69 square meters. But on the 24th of September, we had a headline, smarter and smaller hospital in the media, stated reduction from 73,000 to 69,000 with no reduction in cost. Confused? You should be. It seems everyone in confusion over the size and scale of the proposed development. Today we heard that the mental health facility will cost 45 million, but at the table that we have in front of us, it's 12.5 million. It was cited again. I'm not disputing the numbers. It's important to emphasize. I'm just stating the reasons for the numbers that I have and the confusion that not only me but other members and the public have. Second, cost per square meters. We had 10,500 pounds per square meters, 5,500 per square meters, 3,500. As we all heard yesterday, we didn't get clear answers about which cost estimates we're using. At least since Monday, I raised twice, and members know this, and asked for clarification regarding the further numbers. 4,497 pounds per square meter, including preliminaries, costs, and risks. Does it mean contingencies? And the Deputy Chief Minister stated this number in the response to the scrutiny panel. It's Appendix 1 on the 27th of August. On the 8th of September, Assistant Treasury Minister told us that the cost per square meter is about 6,150. And again, I asked what this includes, and I still didn't have a breakdown. So for my common sense, if 4,500, let's say, included fees, preliminaries, and contingencies, so 6,200 should include more. And the quick calculation, the latest size, which is 69 square meters for 6,200 per square meter, would work out under 425 million. And it brings us to the outstanding business case, which the cost, okay? And we are going to the cost. And it was mentioned already that the main building and associated cost 204 and will come to 311 million with energy center, mental health, knowledge center, car park, external work, demolition, highways, together 311 million. How did we manage to get 500 million of associated costs? The associated cost I estimated higher, like Deputy Ward said in his speech, than the building of the hospital. We asked several times for breakdown of 39 million of Government of Jersey cost and preliminaries. And again, when I know the Deputy Ward asked about 39 million of Government of Jersey cost, he looked if we are not double accounting. When I'm thinking about 39 for the government employees, and I'm adding, are we not double accounting for designer and all professional that employed through the contractor? I don't know. maybe it is justified. The only thing that I'm, as a chair of Public Accounts Committee, would expect to see is itemized cost and not just the final number. I understand, and I do have a sympathy that the project is under development, and at the same time, we have been asked today to sign off 804 million without any clear understanding how this figure has been achieved. I propose the more extreme cost of the hospital and more stringent calculation should be in place. And I think that we have more scrutiny. I had more scrutiny when I asked for £100,000 on the youth service than for 804 million for the hospital. Chapter number 2, how will our healthcare system function? I'm not sure if members had a chance to read latest Controller and Auditor General report published on the 13th of September. Government's arrangement for health and social care, the follow-up report. She clearly stated the governance arrangements for the Jersey Care model and the Our Hospital project sit outside of the health and care services business as usual governance arrangement, and separate governance arrangement has been established for the Jersey Care model and for Our Hospital project. What does it mean in practice? First, the outlined business case does not demonstrate alignment between the Our Hospital project and key strategic programs like Jersey Care models. It gives the impression that proposals for the new hospital have been developed in isolation from the broader strategic context. The panel advisor stated, it is acknowledged that the Jersey Care model was developed as a separate program, but we would expect that OBC to provide greater detail on the clinical strategy for the new hospital, which is derived from the Jersey Care model, and to demonstrate how Our Hospital project will contribute to the delivery of the Jersey Care model. Second, it's clear, I hope it's clear for all members that we'll need additional funds for the infrastructure for the Jersey Care model. On the 28th of June, during the public hearing at the Public Accounts Committee with Director General for Health and Social Services, I personally asked, as we are developing Jersey Care model, have you had time to submit your requirements for the property needs for the estate that will require for the next 5-10 years and Jersey Care models? And when, if not, when detailed requirements will be submitted to the Corporate Asset Management Board, which should oversight this? And the answer was that it has not been identified at this point. I'm talking about June. The latest example that came to our attention followed the panel's visit to the recent refurbished Child Development and Therapy Center, currently housed in the Overdale site. This service will move to Lacanave, but yet no clear plans for its future accommodation when this site will be vacated. We have the new building that will be allocated, which I understand needs to be allocated to build a new hospital, but we don't have plan going forward, and it will cost money. And the professional team was very clear that they need to deliver from the central location. It will not work from satellite, as it will cost double. They need special sensor room, they need gym. There are special facilities that this service is required. I'm concerned that there is not enough incorporation, and we'll need the new infrastructure for delivering the Jersey Care model, and we'll need to find another places and invest more money into this. And I will not mention Summer Ward, I will not mention Pain Clinic, I will not mention several other services that were not reconsidered. And this is bringing me to the last chapter of my speech, prior the closing the remarks, size and accommodation. Size for good, modern, standard quality, 500 beds is the size that we have, and we have only 300. Our advisors have been quite clear that outline business case provided is not robust, and justification for the scale or scope of the build proposed has not been provided. Is it down to single occupancy? 75% single occupancy, it's a great goal. And definitely the health minister explained how it's important. And I appreciate that we need privacy. But there are several reasons why we should be conscious of this design. And I think there is a big gap between single occupancy and 6-bed wards that we have now. I'm sure that we can look at something in the middle or maybe some other percentage. The single room need more staff. It's a steep change, an increase from existing workforce. And OBC doesn't set out the workforce plans. We have been told that the current staffing will be enough. We heard just yesterday that we are urgently recruiting staff now. We all know that we don't have enough staff now. And it's also, we have debate about the wages, that we need to support our health workers, that it's not just it's hospital, but it's also the day-to-day living and the bills that they need to pay. We risk how we'll get enough staff to move to 75% single rooms. It hasn't been stated in outline business case, and it hasn't been calculated. We risk patients being neglected in single rooms and healthcare standards falling in our shiny new building. Members, ask yourself, if you have to choose a private room or to have cataract operation within a week and not 16 months, what would you prefer? I ask myself, and I know exactly what I would prefer. We have waiting list in Jersey right now, and it's caused partially by our staffing problems. And 75% of single rooms will make staffing problems worse. If we don't include this in the budget, it increased staffing, we will never have a better health service despite having a bigger and better hospital. The balance should be struck. And we all know that our financial situation with 1.8 billion projected debt as it stands now will restrain our future spending. And this brings us to the funding, the final points. The scale of the project is higher than our annual personal income tax, corporate tax, and GST put together. In event of the non-delivery of investment on return, an increase in project cost and tax and spend decisions for the public service on the island will be impacted. Our choices will be very limited. Global uncertainty. The government relying on global stability and financial services and markets does not exist. The global uncertainty increasingly, and it's apparent for everyone. And remember, bond finance is not free money. Irrespectively how cheap the money is irrespectively, the annual payment back will be 19 million and a substantial amount. We must ensure that affordability is considered at every level of the project. There are no definite numbers. We do not have stable projected cost even over the last couple of months. I personally been criticized again, asking repeatedly for clarity and consistency. I do have a sympathy that it's still ongoing development and really complex project. At the same time, I have daily emails asking me the same question as I'm asking here. So it's not just I'm confused, the public as well. I'm really worried that we will spill over the budget on a structure and will have insufficient staff to other remain items and to our staff that I mentioned. When the Chief Minister published report R54 2019 outlined his next step, he committed that financial phasing and planning phase, a 20 months period to take the project to the full business case by February 21. I understand, COVID on the way, agree, it might be not February 21, but the full business case, which projected cost of 7.5 million, 2.5 years later, projected cost now we have already paid approximately 47 million pounds, forecast 59.5 in October, and we are touching 70 million spent by November. With this track record, our members need to ask themselves, are you ready to give green light for 804 million without control from the State Assembly going forward. The potential for this assembly to lose control of the cost due of the nature of this project is substantial, and we might face, I hope we'll not, but it's still in the proposition that after spending 804 million, they will come again and ask, we need extra 100. The panel has not suggested cutting the range of services by third. We suggested that Council of Ministers revisit its business case and produce a solution fit for purpose, answers the Jersey needs, and has an appropriate budget. Treasury Minister suggested that the panel didn't understand how to reduce. Actually, we did, but we did have various options, from work to compulsory purchase. We have so many options, but it was actually taken strategic decision not to tell exactly to the government, because whatever our suggestions were, they were so different, but all of them came to the same conclusion, that we can do it within the budget of 550, but we didn't want to restrict government choice and to make their own decision how to manage. If we need to make clarity, we will do it in the future, but I think it's just fair to leave it for more open and flexible. We all have letters from clinicians, from the nurses. It was open letters in the media poll. We had submissions to the panel, which supporting the panel. We all spent dozens of thousands for our consultants, but consultants here to consult. And our consultant told us, reject the project. And actually we said, we can see where is the difficulties. We acknowledge that there are lots of several problems, but we want to see this coming forward. And this is the reason that the panel presented today the restriction to the budget. Islanders want their political leaders to focus clearly on the level of borrowing expenditure involved in the project. In the current financial circumstances, we need to reduce exposure and known future financial risk. An affordable and appropriated figure for the Jersey New Hospital is 550 million currently. Come back, prove differently, happy. We're gonna make a decision, and we need to make a right decision. I said previously, let's get on with it at the right cost. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy St John.
Thank you, sir. So I've recently been working on a presentation for the Mind Jersey conference that's coming up this Friday, and began researching the history of provision for the mentally ill in the island over the last couple of centuries. The current provision is, of course, a vast improvement in relation to that available in, say, the early 19th century. There are, however, some similarities between then and now. So in 1847, the Westminster government had to compel the states of Jersey to drag the then mental health offer, a cruel offer, into the modern world. Plans were drawn for a new hospital, or at that time known as a lunatic asylum, as the provision was known in those days. Just imagine the excitement generated in the island, knowing that there was about to be a new asylum. Well, sir, don't hold your breath. The foundation stone for the asylum was not laid until July 1865, that is, 18 years after the Westminster intervention. The states had been extremely reluctant to spend money on the proposed purpose-built asylum. Such was the reluctance that in 1859 a proposal was lodged in the states to delay building altogether. It was only because the then Lieutenant Governor, Sir Robert Percy Douglas, took the rare decision to veto the proposition, thus blocking the move and allowing the building to go ahead. The first 12 patients were moved from the General Hospital on the 11th of July 1868. 21 years, yes, 21 years after the Westminster government had intervened to compel the states to act. Sir, are we seeing history repeating itself, given that mental health services are currently dependent on a new hospital build to provide up-to-date inpatient facilities that are fit for purpose in the 22nd century? The need for a new hospital was described in P82 2012, a proposition that was enthusiastically endorsed by the states. So why have we wasted 10 years so far? So if this amendment is allowed and the can is kicked down the road, it's very likely that a significant further delay to the project will be the effect. Urgently needed mental health accommodation will be held up again, or worse still, will not be developed at all. The need to provide new clinical facilities for all specialities currently accommodated within the General Hospital is well established and has been for a considerable time. We have all received a letter from professionals allied to medicine who are having to endure the difficulties of delivering care in the current environment. The Health Minister alluded to the letter in his speech. I personally shared the experiences of these healthcare professionals, given that the last 12 years of my professional life were spent delivering nursing care at the bedside in the very difficult clinical environment that is the current General Hospital. Sir, I will let the clinicians' concerns and their plea to get on with it enter the record. We should not accept this amendment and repeat the gross error seen in the 19th century. So the letter reads as follows, and I will read it in full. Dear all, our respective professions are incredibly rewarding, and we would come to work every day to provide the best possible care for our islanders. However, in the current environment, this is an ever-increasing challenge. We understand the case for a new hospital is well made, which is hugely positive, as it is needed to deliver safe, modern healthcare for future generations of the island. When we heard that Overdale had been agreed as a site, the news was met with great relief that work could finally begin and a turnkey building fit for purpose was on the horizon and in sight for all of us. We can accept working in this environment for another 5 years in the knowledge that the new build has begun, but we want to be clear that it is increasingly difficult. Every single day, every single shift, we work around the challenges of the current ageing buildings, both on the hospital site and St Saviour site, to deliver the best care that we can. The reality is the buildings need constant attention. Care is delivered in a suboptimal environment and we simply don't have enough space, full stop. We have to empty bathrooms before we offer patients their use, as they are used for storage of essential equipment. We don't have suitable space to break bad news in private. The bays are cramped and patients are so close together they can hear everything happening to others around them. There's no space for staff to rest during their shift, and teaching space for staff in the clinical environment is non-existent. We have such a limit on single rooms that we have a daily juggle and have to constantly move patients in order to manage and prioritise the increasingly competing numbers of patients who need a room. These are decisions that we shouldn't have to constantly be taking. Our priority should be focused on delivery of care and hands-on with our patients, not hands-on moving beds and equipment, just so that we can deliver the most basic fundamentals of care. Along with our consultant colleagues, we've been involved in the design of the new hospital. This has been really exciting work and finally brings together physical and mental health on one site and affords patients and our staff a building that is fit for purpose, that demonstrates investment and the value we all place on health. We appeal to you as our state's members that you support the plans for the hospital build and approve the funding proposals so that work can begin without any further delay, and we can finally look forward to caring for our islanders in an environment that supports and promotes the delivery of good healthcare. So this letter was signed by 83 healthcare professionals allied to medicine, and I list that list of professionals. There were nurses, physiotherapists, psychologists, occupational therapists, podiatrists, midwives, physical therapists, community health, mental health practitioners, alcohol service practitioners, substance misuse practitioners, and learning disabilities practitioners. So with that logged into Hansard, I finish my presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Conor Talbotson, one.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to start with the panel's opening comment, and I quote, "The message the panel has received is that Jersey needs a good hospital which caters for the needs of the community." And indeed, as the Health Minister and the Deputy of St Juan and Deputy of St John have outlined, I think it's something we all agree on. So the proposition suggests that there is a strong backdrop of public opinion that the hospital can be built for less than 804 million. However, ever since the question of a new hospital has been raised, we have seen various pressure groups push a wide variety of views about the site, the cost, and indeed what facilities should be offered. Indeed, only yesterday we saw a petition launch which wants the site of our new hospital to be debated yet again. So we have seen both hospital staff and clinicians come out strongly in support of the current plans. And in my view, they are in a very strong position to express that view, and as Deputy Poynton has highlighted most eloquently. And not least because the clinicians were involved in the design and the content of the hospital. So I'd have to suggest, at the very least, the picture is mixed and perhaps not as clear as the panel would like to suggest. So I have a few points I wish to make in relation to the amendment. So as we know, the current projected cost of the new hospital is 604 million, the balance being made up largely of contingency. The panel's suggested budget is 550 million, a shortfall of some 50 million pounds. So some of the ways suggested by the amendment says how this could be achieved. They suggest that ward sizes, a reduction in ward sizes with the suggestion that no private ward should be provided, as the benefit is anecdotal. However, my understanding is that private patients are self-financing and pay all their costs, as well as making a substantial contribution to overall hospital running costs. And indeed, that view has been endorsed by the Health Minister. So I would suggest, as a consequence of having excellent private facilities, we are also able to attract some of the best medical consultants to the island, partly based on their ability to undertake a private practice alongside their general practice. Given that private medical insurance is a common benefit in the finance industry, our major industry, Jersey is seen as a good location for private practice, with the added benefit that these quality consultants bring to our public practice. Or do we not value the medical excellence these consultants bring to the island? So furthermore, we've seen the need for added wall space in the last pandemic. So did we learn nothing from that experience? So, and in that respect, did I miss something? Was it not the intention to centralise all those services located outside of the current general hospital, including those at Overdale, into the new hospital, which in my view would likely account for the 30,000 square foot increase in the current footprint of the general hospital of about 40,000. And that again has been confirmed by the Health Minister in his speech. Another suggestion was to reduce the car park space. A great suggestion for a hospital not within reasonable walking distance of any other multi-storey. Oh wait, you could cycle or walk. Even better if you were accompanying a sick elderly relative or not feeling so good yourself. So an effective redesign is suggested, reducing the size of the building and, to quote, a reduction in beautification, which could be read as making it smaller, starker and ugly. A great idea if you consider its prominent location. In my view, the feel-good factor of going into a building that is pleasant to use should not be undervalued, especially at a time when most visitors are not feeling at their best mentally. And as we know, mental health is a very important factor in the quick recovery of many patients. So the revised suggested maximum spend to remove any current contingencies, currently estimated at 33% of the build cost. Writing these contingencies back into the scrutiny proposal, as surely contingencies represent prudent project management, would suggest a baseline build cost in their proposition of some 330 million, roughly half of what it is being proposed at the moment. And that to me doesn't seem to be enough. The panel in their own presentation are suggesting a build cost of 412 million. So are they suggesting tighter contingencies? And indeed, is that prudent? So, furthermore and interestingly, Scrutiny's own experts, Curry and Brown, and I quote them directly, said at a recent presentation by the panel, the build costs are appropriate for the site size. They did question the need for the site size proposed, but however, back to my original point about this being more than just a direct replacement for the current general hospital. So I would suggest if you're satisfied that the size is correct, then it would seem that the costs are also in proportion. So I'd like to address a few comments about the financing arrangements. So firstly, risk and the potential for the decline in our invested reserves. Risk and reward of bedfellows. You cannot have one without the other. The key is how you deal with risk. Treasury have demonstrated sound management of our investment portfolios for some time by sensible diversification of markets and asset types, the classic investment risk mitigation tools. Furthermore, our portfolios are managed by top fund managers, selected using recognised processes, and the performance is monitored against industry benchmarks. The amendment highlights an uncertain future, but market volatility is not new, and uncertainty also generates opportunity in investment terms. Our portfolios survived COVID markets through good stewardship, and I'm sure this will continue. Secondly, our credit rating. The amendment suggests the suggested borrowing against our reserves may impact our credit rating by a notch and impact future borrowing opportunities and the interest cost thereon. This view has not been tested with credit rating agencies, as I would have expected, and in my view should be interpreted with a degree of caution because of this. So, and finally, timing. Interest rates are at all-time historic low, and with the prospect of renewed growth and rising equity markets, and the possibility of higher inflation as the economy expands post-pandemic, this scenario is unlikely to last. So the opportunity to leverage investment growth rates against those lowest of interest rates will not last forever and should be grasped now. And I'd also just like to address a comment about the UK Chancellor's remarks. That the UK's borrowing in relation to its GDP and national wealth is substantially different to ours. So I would have to suggest that those comments bear no relationship to Jersey because we have very little borrowing. And indeed, even with this, our borrowing will be nowhere near the size of the UK's borrowing. So in my view, the acceptance of this amendment will result in a substantially underfunded project, which would also result in a major redesign to accommodate the smaller budget and the greatly extended timescale to completion of the project. Given the substantial cost of keeping the current hospital going, any gains made financially could well be severely eroded by any such delay, and indeed the Health Minister referred to this in his speech. I cannot support this amendment because of this, and I urge members to think carefully on the impact of our future healthcare and the non-delivery of our new hospital will have not just on us, but our children and their children. We have continually underinvested in our health estate, dithered over a health replacement hospital. Now is the time to show courage and deliver the hospital and the healthcare needs this island needs. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Quinton. Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. And I agree with my constable this morning that Senator Moore set out her stall with great clarity this morning. I do feel, however, with respect that she dodged one inconvenient truth, which I'll come to later, and also missed one debate, an important one. 5 months prior to the debate to remove Gloucester Street as the preferred site for the new hospital, I brought another proposition to the Assembly in September 2018 to change the terms of reference for the independent UK planning inspector and his impending public inquiry, so as to allow him to recognise the existence of alternative sites, something which the terms of reference had expressly forbade. Both debates were won decisively, 30 plus in favour, and on both occasions only 7 against. They were a different 7 each time, although Senator Moore was consistent in her opposition. The motivation for both of these propositions, and I knew absolutely zero about building hospitals, but felt I had to do it, because at that time in Jersey, you couldn't move for clinicians, nurses, and health workers voicing their dissatisfaction with the Gloucester Street plans, complaining of not being consulted, grave concerns about the inadequacy of what was being proposed. The Assembly listened. Thanks to its decisiveness, we were able to wipe the slate clean and begin again with a new team whose planning would this time be clinically led. And here we are, on the cusp of delivering exactly what they want this time, but with a proposition before us that will, at the very least, as the Health Minister said this morning, delay the project by 18 months to 2 years. We know that for some supporters of this amendment, a flame still burns, the hope still exists of actually a return to Gloucester Street. Combined with a delay, this results in the prospect of uncertainty and delay. That is what this amendment will bring. Uncertainty and delay that will be damaging and soul destroying. If any member believes that the public of this island are looking to the Assembly today to provide uncertainty and delay on the new hospital, they are severely misguided. Uncertainty and delay will hinder my efforts to have released more government-owned land for housing and housing of key workers. I don't want to have to wait another 2 years for Lekeneve and other sites. And that is if we can attract key workers with the prospect of extending the life of our moribund hospital, old hospital, for yet another 2 years. So I like the Constable of St. John very much. He's not angry all of the time, but I think we can all detect in this chamber from him almost a lifetime of anger and frustration at observing the workings of this Assembly. But I can't help feeling this morning that he's actually promoting going back to the bad old days. And I ask him to reflect on this. What does he think any clinician, nurse, hospital worker will feel listening to his speech this morning, if not anger and frustration at the prospect of more uncertainty and delay with the hospital? I can't help feeling Reform Jersey have found themselves on the wrong side of this argument, even if it means voting with the government on this occasion. And I hope they will keep their minds open, and it's okay to change your mind. That's what debates in this Assembly are all about. And I say to them this: if you won't listen to the clinicians, listen to the nurses, working men and women. Sir, with its backing of my propositions earlier in this term, the Assembly set the hospital on a new course, a new clinically led course. I echo the Health Minister in saying no delay, no U-turns. Let's get on and get this hospital built.
Debbie, will you give way for a point of clarification from Deputy Tadier?
Who from, sir?
Deputy Tadier has asked for a point of clarification.
No, sir, I've finished. I've said all I have to say.
Very much indeed. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And it does seem to be one of those days that you think I've definitely been here before, and I have definitely been here before. In 2008 to 14, I was the Assistant Minister at Health, and within the first year of that, we were told we would definitely need a new hospital. And we are now June 2021, and still nothing. And it was in a bad old state then, sir. We're, you know, bit of patchwork, make do amend, but it's a hospital. So I wanted to start as well, sir, on Senator Moore's opening speech about scrutiny is here to hold the government to account and to provide evidence as why this won't work, etc. So just bear with me a minute, sir, while I read out their call for evidence. The funding proposition was lodged on the 3rd of August 21 and will be debated on the 5th of October 21. And the panel would like to receive thoughts on the government's outline business case and proposed funding for the new hospital. The panel would particularly like to receive views on whether the proposed budget of 804.5 million is appropriate for Jersey and this project, on whether 756 million of that budget should be borrowed using public bonds, on whether the borrowing of this scale should be used to finance a new hospital, on whether the investment return to the strategic reserve should be used to pay debt from cost, management and administrative costs, and on whether the proposition adequately addresses the economic risks or benefits, on whether the conclusions on the outline business case are reasonable, on whether the outline business case provides sufficient evidence to support the scale projected, and on whether it is sensible to use a strategic reserve rainy day fund to manage the debt of our hospital. And there's some doozy letters that come back, and scrutiny is based on evidence. There's opinions, there's some lovely letters, there's questions asking the scrutiny panel, more questions, but I'm flicking through, I've read some, but there's no evidence. Well, what do you expect? I'm surprised they only got 130 letters. Everyone's got an opinion and a thought on it, sir, but they got 130 views and thoughts with no evidence. So don't say that Deputy Gardner said, and we've got evidence that supports us, views from the public. And it's like saying, do you really want to pay all your tax this year? Why don't you want to pay half? Give us some views and thoughts on that. It's not evidence, sir. It's really not evidence. And then we did have the Murray poll, the Bailiwick poll. We don't know how scientific that was, sir. It might have been a Love Island poll for all I know, you know, it could have that much science in it, but it probably, you know, it was very easy to fill in because it was a poll and it was on digital. And I listened, sir, I went to the hearing, I suppose you call it, that the Senator had on Friday, and she had all her consultants there. And it was hard, and I don't blame the Senator for anything, that we didn't have the report then, but I could hear questions being asked. Deputy Ward was trying to ask them, this figure on this side doesn't add up to this figure, well, that figure is this and that. And I thought, I think I know what he's getting at. So I said to the consultant, what I think Deputy is asking and what I'd like to know, is there anything wrong with the figure of 804? And the Senator this morning said herself, there's nothing wrong with the figure of 804. It actually makes the case. Then he came back to me and he said, but we don't think you should have a hospital that size. We don't think that you should have a hospital. These are outside external consultants who have come to tell us, we don't think that you should have a hospital of that size, and you should pay less for it. And this is where I think the missing part is, when Deputy Ward won't have it, and he's told me I must listen to him, so he must listen to me, sir. The hospital size is going to cost 800, and they want to take a third off of it. Now, where does that third come off? It will have to go back to the drawing board. It will have to start again. So if Deputy Ward says the government is putting the gun to his head because he won't go to the point, scrutiny are putting the gun to the government's head, sir. because it's been going on for months now, with a consultant sitting down, clinicians seeing that they're actually being listened to, not like the last one, what Deputy Lovey had to rescind because they hadn't been listened to, but they have been listened to. And who do I want to listen to? Two sets of consultants who are advising scrutiny. One's building boxes and the other one's a financials advisor. Or do I want to listen to my consultants and clinicians and my nurses in that hospital who know what's coming down the line? Because most of them are anoraks. They want to know what the best medical procedures being done over there in America, in China. And they want to know that they can do it, and they want to know they can have the equipment to do it. So do I want to listen to them? Or somebody said, well, your figures are okay, but we just think your hospital's too big. No, I don't want to listen to them. And that's what they're doing. So they then say, take 250 million off and you'll get the same hospital. They have to rethink again. The health minister said this morning, they're not rethinking again. What do you want to take out? We want the mental health facility. We want all the new things. We want this hospital to last for years and years and years, be future-proof. And the people who know what it needs to go in, what needs to go best, even in design-wise, that's better go in there. So, because it might be pathology and it might be something else, but it fits. They're the ones who are telling us, not somebody who said, yes, well, and the hospital, if it was built like this in so-and-so, wouldn't be this big. And the health minister actually said as well on Friday to them, but you do know this is Jersey. We don't have the luxury of getting in an ambulance and taking that sick child down 100, just to the next hospital, 50 miles up the road or 100 miles up the road. We don't have that luxury. This hospital has been stuck together, it's been put together, it's been held up, it is rotten, and the absolute thing that they are hanging on to is that they get their new hospital. We know, Deputy Gardner said that the retention of staff is hard. This goes south today, sir, it will be even harder. Absolutely, it's hard across the whole of the UK. We want to offer this is where you will come and work. Infection control, you have the best of this. You can get best. They've seen on that Facebook server. We don't want the best. We just want a hospital. No, I want the best for the people here. And so do the clinicians. I don't want a half-hearted, attempt. Somebody said a cottage hospital yesterday. And the accusations, I say, these people are out there. They've all been fired up by I think they're called the Friends of the Hospital. Well, with friends like that, sir, there's few ex-states members. There's a few, putting out their stalls. I'm coming in next year, Deputy Martin. I'll sort you out. We'll sort that out first for you, but leave me alone and don't wind people up. Do not wind people up. 50 people becomes 150 people in the rain. I have respect, but they're not 110,000 people, which is what we've got the population. What about the silent few? They are the silent few. There's millions of silent. All our residents are silent, except these same people keep turning up. They're there Saturday. They're there. They're on the Facebook. On the Facebook, sir. The certain person said half of the consultants don't work here anymore. Blah, blah, blah. Then they're all locums. They've got no, no future in Jersey. They won't pay tax. They won't pay for this. Some terrible, terrible things have been said. This is a wrecking amendment because we cannot get all that's been worked up into a smaller box. And as I say, the consultants knew about boxes, and he told me on Friday that our box was too big and he wanted to see it smaller. And that is when I said, well, if we make it smaller, who are we going to go back to? Well, who's the health minister going to go? Should we take out mental health? Or shall we take out something else? What should we actually take out? maybe smaller maternity, or I don't know, you know, we're having less babies, but there's things, but we wouldn't do any of that. We don't have another hospital. We don't. It's all be in there. So honestly, sir, we've heard some speeches today that they think that this is literally the government haven't done this, you know, they haven't got that. The people working, our consultants and the people putting the business case together and working with the clinicians have sat down and listened, and as the health minister said, they have literally, you know, stress tested and said you can't have everything you want, but you know, let's get this right and let's get on with it. And we will really have trouble. As the health minister said, we can't just go away and say we'll fit this in a different size box and we'll carry on doing all we can. It's a third of a size smaller than was planned. It's £250 million they want us to lob off, and we will not get the hospital we want. And as I say, there's more people out there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people out there who want this hospital. It's been planned for 10 years. It really, really needs to be done. And I don't want to have a go at reform, and I'm not going to have a go at reform. But I was going to be nice. I just know, like, sometimes yes, if it is to kick the government, but I don't think it is. You've got to think that the people that, you know, the party represents, who Deputy Ward said, you know, we want 3 school meals for, we want 3 buses for. Well, what about the healthcare that you want for these children, that you want for them? Because their families haven't got private insurance. They're going off to Bupa hospitals across the road. They're stuck here in this hospital. And if this hospital is not the best hospital, they'll be the ones that suffer. And I just don't think reform want that. They may have been talking to so many other people along the back. The 6th reformer, who sort of got a very funny, is allegiance with the minister, actually. He's an assistant. But anyway, sir, because this 9% was mooted on Friday when Deputy Ward was there, and it was said today by Deputy Ward, but the figure came out the mouth of Deputy Morrell. You know, sometimes it does affect you who you sit next to, you know. It really does. Poor people. Trevor sits next to, Deputy St John's, that's why he's not here today, sir. But I can't emphasise enough that after 10 years, we were at the 2 sites. That was another, that was seen off. We're going to have People's Park. We're going to go back to the thing. And now everyone, the clinicians, the nurses, that broke my heart, the nurses letter. And I know I won't go on about it, Trevor, Deputy Poynton, Deputy St John read it out. But these people don't make it up. These are the everyday working people, the 12-hour shifts. I happened to be in A&E the other weekend, and they are so tired. And they just say, sitting and eating their sandwich on a wheelchair. Just nothing for the staff. And they can't wait another, because it will go back to the drawing board. What can you put in this? Make it smaller. I know there'll be arguments. I'll just give up. And even worse than that, it's people who know far better than me say the whole contractor will probably just walk away. So you've got to go right back to the beginning. And what does that do? What does that do? The first thing people want to know is that if they're sick, there's someone to look after them, and it's going to be somewhere nice. And we can do it. We can do it. We've been planning it, and it don't happen today. If the amendment wins, it goes away. It come back again in 4 years' time, and guess what? It'll be dearer, sir. It'll be more money. So I'll leave it there, but I really, really do ask. You know, it wouldn't hurt reform. They do support these people. They are the party for these people who don't have any other choice. Many, you know, all the finance, you know, you work in finance, you might have a top job in finance, but receptionist, you've got a medical package, your family's got a medical package. Doesn't matter to you. You can go and have a nice private hospital in Surrey somewhere for a weekend. I'll leave it there, sir, but please, the evidence has not materialised. Those letters are literally what the scrutiny panel asked for, some thoughts and views. Thoughts and views. Not from not one person who's ever built a hospital or managed an 800 million budget. Well, you can imagine what them thoughts and views were, sir. I would say you want to read some of them. They're very nice letters, meaning well, but definitely, you know, I mean, some people probably haven't ever spent more than, you know, whatever. I'll leave it there. There's no evidence, just picked a figure out of the air, and there's been a lot of shouting about, and it's all the same people. It's rent a crowd of friends of the hospital, sir. Thank you.
Right, Harbison, Peter.
Thank you, sir. I don't think there's ever been an amendment or proposition where I've had more difficulty in deciding how I should vote, and there may be others in a similar position. However, I decided to listen to the debate, and ultimately I've decided not to support the amendment. My undecidedness can be marked by the fact that during the last week I've written speeches both supporting and not supporting the amendment. However, I don't need any of those now because I believe everything that can be said has been said. I will, however, just mention some of my concerns I had that would have led me to not support the proposition. There are financial concerns regarding low interest rates and whether a low interest rate is really a reason for borrowing the maximum amount that you should. I wasn't comfortable with that. And whilst the investments that we have may perform better than the rate on the loan, there are times when we won't be able to guarantee that. We didn't know, for instance, that COVID would come and affect the financial markets. From time to time, we have experienced financial crashes, and all those should be factored into such decisions. But my main concern with borrowing 800 million is the likely impact on our credit rating. In effect, we will be borrowing 80% of the value of our reserves. And I can't believe that that won't have some effect unless we mitigate that in some way. The effect on the finance industry, which currently is faring well, and that in a large part is due to the hard work of both government and the private sector, has been to develop and promote the industry in a reasonable fashion. However, we see headwinds from international regulation post-Brexit, and questions over our credit rating will raise concerns with those looking at the island as a location for the provision of financial services. And I would ask the Treasury Minister to ensure that they take steps to minimise the impact on our credit rating and take the appropriate advice. That said, my ultimate decision is not to support the proposition. It might be prudent to initially borrow less, but with tight controls on our additional expenditure, we can deliver within budget, and we can be financially responsible and prudent, and deliver the hospital that both the public and staff deserve. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can I tell Senator Balwa?
Yes, thank you. And Deputy Martin will probably be happy to hear that I've significantly reduced my speech because many members have made comments that were similar to what I was going to make. So I speak now, sir, because I note that Senator Farnham and Senator Le Fondre both haven't contributed as of yet. So I have some questions within my speech, which I hope that they'll be able to answer and answer clearly, because one of the concerns that I have, so I'm going to open up my speech by referencing the Minister's actual proposition, the report on page 11, where it refers to business cases are a recognised way to provide information to help inform decisions on projects. They provide a way of considering if the project is deliverable, provides value for money, achieves objectives, and delivers benefits and social value. So I've read through the whole proposition, the report, the OBC, the scrutiny report. Oh, and not just the thoughts of those who took the time to contribute to the scrutiny review, but actually the advisors who do know what they're doing. I've actually looked at their report as well. And so, sir, on that basis, it does concern me when I look on page 10 of the Curry and Brown report, which refers to a lack of detail in the strategic case. And I would like to ask, where is the clinical strategy, the demand and capacity modelling, the digital strategy, the workforce strategy, the estate strategy for health and investment objectives? They refer to business as usual costs, which refers to net value to society, which surely comes in the recognisable objective of this proposition of having a business case that informs decision making. So there's also mention in the report to the proposition, the main proposition, about critical success factors and recognising that this was not considered around the baseline comparator. But then if we refer specifically to the Curry and Brown report, where they state that critical success factors for this project do not cover value for money, supply capacity and capability or potential achievability. So, sir, I'd like to understand that if it is the case in which the council ministers, Our Hospital project claim that a business case is to inform decision making, why those particular areas have not been completed or considered. And then I go on to the factor in the importance of outcomes-based accountability and how we ensure when we're putting a project together that we can measure it through from baseline to outputs. And so when I look at this amendment and I hear what the Treasury Minister said in her speech earlier, I look at the budget estimates that are within the report to the main proposition and how they have changed from P123 2020 to what is now the outline business case. And I refer outline business case, sir, because when we talk about risks and managing risks, especially with this type of thing, and which I actually have to applaud the hospital project on their ability to drop optimism bias from 100 million to 38 million by producing the outline business case. But sir, the full business case will not be completed until May 2022, which would help to further identify and ensure that we're managing those risks appropriately. So then I ask myself, what do I do then in terms of borrowing? And do I believe that £800 million borrowing? And do I feel that the information provided in the outline business case is sufficient for making such a decision? And so I don't feel like when questions have been asked that clarity of answers have been given in a variety of different examples. And I'll use the proposition for access routes, where we agreed it on the basis of understanding that there was a very close connection between two options. And we're asking for value for money, and yet we're going down a route which will provide more expense. And there's been questions raised time and time again that people feel they haven't had the answers to, or the diagrams, or the information around what that may or may not look like. And this goes back to the openness and transparency and the importance of people understanding how they're making their decisions. And when this type of proposition comes to us, this is the biggest borrowing that the States Assembly have ever been asked to borrow. And it is absolutely for the right reasons. we do need a new hospital. I totally agree with that. And I'm not going to make any arguments about whether it's the right or wrong site or whatever that might be. We're talking about the finances here. And there's an element within this finance which talks about client contingency. And I'd really appreciate it if there was an example that could be given, or an initiative that might happen within the project that would require the need for that client contingency, because it's not clear when I look at the information that's being provided. And I think that's really important, because this is a £73 million contingency. So when I think of the Treasury, I go back to the Treasury Minister's argument, and I think back to the amount of times we've changed the rules or the requirements around the strategic reserve, starting back in 2013, where we set a capital value on the strategic reserve to ensure that we kept a form of rainy day fund to cover those extreme circumstances. Then the net value after that would have been used to assist with hospital build. And I think there was a number of other things. So today's capital holding in the strategic reserve is 765 million, well, as of end of 2020. So the actual strategic reserve value at the end of 2020, 968 million. And we're being told that this amendment is basically going to delay everything, going to stop it and halt everything. We're going to have to redo and relook at all the different bits and pieces. Actually, my argument's going to be, well, what if this amendment was approved and we're holding your feet to the fire to say, well, actually, if you can prove to us by doing a proper full business case and provide the actual information that is needed to make the appropriate decisions, then we could discuss this again when we discuss the government plan, where we discuss the likes of changing the public finances law, or changing the budget, or changing the income and expenditure. Oh, and also the borrowing amounts that are required for the states of Jersey, or should I say the government of Jersey, to function. So I don't believe the argument that this is going to delay everything is a good enough one. I've seen historically ways that Treasury ministers have managed to be flexible and do things that enable a democratic process to be listened to and the people to be heard in terms of accountability. This is a large project. I absolutely want to get on with it, sir. And I really hope that I get some of the questions that I've asked answered. That there is a real concern. It's not just, I get the points that the health minister's made because I've heard it all before. I get the arguments that are being made by clinicians and nurses, and because I've heard that time and time again. But sir, when we're making decisions in this assembly, it's not just our hearts and our heartstrings that are being pulled that we have to consider. We have to consider the facts. And sir, factually, there might be lots of information there, but the clarity of that information, in my opinion, is poor. And if we were to go towards more of a full business case, we would reduce that risk because we have more of an idea of what that design would look like. And I recognise that won't be until May next year, sir. But what I'm asking is that even if I was, because this debate's been brought today, because it was the decision of the Council of Ministers to debate this on the 5th of October, then I would say, well, why shouldn't I support the amendment? And then they can prove to me in the government plan if they do need further funding. And so at the moment, that's my position. I do not accept the arguments about delay. I do not accept the arguments that scrutiny have done their work just on the basis of thoughts and opinions. And I'd like for questions to actually be answered, sir. So for what it's worth, that's my contribution to the debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Senator, Deputy Morell, do you say you have a question for the Attorney General?
Yes, sir.
What is your question?
Thank you. It's a constitutional question, sir. And it is, in the event that Jersey is unable to pay, to make repayments on its debts held in bonds, on the open market, so debt's owed to the international community. What is the situation? Is it at all the situation that Jersey alone is responsible for finding a way to repay those debts? Or is there a situation in which the United Kingdom government would be expected to underwrite those debts? It's be expected effectively to step in the event that Jersey's government. So the question is, how financially independent are we, sir, when it comes to debt in the international community in this way, sir?
Well, I'm not sure it's a matter strictly of law that can be answered by the Attorney General, but if the Attorney General has a contribution to make and is able to assist, Mr. Attorney, are you able to offer any assistance to the Assembly?
So yes, I also had reservations as to whether this was a question of law. As I'm sure every member will know, the island has always prided itself on being fiscally independent, and that means it's responsible for its own taxes and expenditure. And I'm not aware of any situation where the UK would be under an obligation to step in to underwrite our financial obligations. So I don't believe that the UK would act so as to pay off our bond interest or capital repayments. But it may be that someone in the Treasury Minister or one of her officials could clarify that further. In terms of if there was a state of emergency then in the island, then possibly the UK would come in to assist, but I'm not sure that failing to repay some interest on some bonds would classify as a state of emergency. So I think that's as far as I can take it.
Thank you. Just to clarify then, in the event of bankruptcy, it is a matter for the island to sort that out in the Attorney General's view.
In my view, yes. The bond instrument will be a very long and complex document, which will have terms and conditions which would provide for methods for resolution of disputes, what will happen if there is a failure to repay interest. All of that will be dealt with in the terms and conditions of the bond. I'm sure there would also be a jurisdiction and governing law clause, which is unlikely to be, I imagine it's unlikely to be Jersey law or Jersey jurisdiction in either case, because most of the financing counterparties would probably not be based here. But that's a preliminary answer on my view, and I stress that that's not based on actually looking at the sorts of bonds in question.
Thank you, sir.
Deputy Simon, do you have a question for the Attorney?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I do. Deputy Morrell referenced a state going bankrupt. Is it possible for a state, or specifically Jersey, as a self-governing jurisdiction, to be declared bankrupt? Thank you, sir.
Are you able to answer that question, Mr. Attorney?
I'm not sure that I can off the top of my head, sir. No, I would probably need some time to answer that. I am aware, obviously, that where, say, a developing country gets into financial difficulties, then the IMF can step in certain circumstances. The UK is obviously responsible for the islands in international law, but I'm not sure as a matter of just in terms of bonds and bond financings, I'm not sure that those would be matters of international law. Those are private law matters. The Jersey, the states of Jersey, the government of Jersey will be the borrower under Minister for Treasury and Resources would be the borrower under those instruments. But I don't think that they would be they would not be international law instruments which the UK would be responsible for. That they seem to me to be much more private law instruments, and we would be responsible for paying them. Whether we could get any, if we did get into serious financial difficulties, whether we could get the IMF to help, then it may well be that we could. But I'm afraid, again, that's as far as I can take it.
Well, Mr. Attorney, I suspect there will be some time for you to consider the matter if you wish to offer any further advice to the Assembly. Clearly, there are a significant number of people still to speak, so that will be a matter for you. Next to speak, however, is Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And I would actually like to start by congratulating the government. I want to congratulate them on what I think has been a masterful exploitation of the mother of all straw man arguments throughout the course of this debate so far. And they've managed to succeed in doing so because of their excellent message discipline that their spokespeople have employed throughout this debate in their attempts to turn it from a debate, a legitimate debate, about how much debt we're prepared to incur for the population we represent now, and whether there is enough information at our disposal to judge whether it is the right or prudent thing to do, and have instead turned it into a debate between those who supposedly want to delay the hospital project and those who want to secure it and move on with it, when in actual fact, there is no such dichotomy here, certainly not from my part whatsoever. The question before the Assembly is an entirely legitimate one on whether we believe that we have the confidence now to give the government the green light to take up the biggest debt that the island has ever taken on and leave that to be paid back by future generations, and to do so on the basis of what some of us consider is not yet adequate information, and instead to be responsible and give the green light for still an extremely substantial amount of borrowing so that they can get on with it. They can get on with delivering us the hospital that we need, and still leave the opportunity, if necessary, for them to come back to the Assembly and say, in those areas that you weren't so sure on at the outset, we can now provide you more detail, or hopefully actually reprofile it and seek to get even better value for money for taxpayers instead, which would clearly be preferable. And I would say to the Health Minister, who I think made quite a big deal out of this in his speech, that I feel that I can vote in favour of this amendment with my conscience clear, as somebody who really, really does want the hospital project to go ahead as soon as possible. And credit to the Deputy Chief Minister, who said in his opening remarks that when I was a minister, I was a pain in the neck to officers and to other ministers, wanting the site selection process to be dealt with differently so that we could have been in this position months ago. But that was to not be the case. I want this hospital project to go ahead. I'm fed up of the debates on the hospital, quite frankly, and I want to be discussing many of the other issues instead. And the reason I can vote for this with my conscience clear is because I simply don't buy it. I don't believe that voting in favour of this somehow jeopardizes the whole project. And I'm convinced by that, partly because of, I think, that the very helpful explanations that have been put to me through the briefings that Scrutiny have held, and through some of my other colleagues as well who have been close to this subject, seeing the breakdown of costs, seeing that the costs in terms of delivering the main works of the hospital are still substantially lower than what Scrutiny is proposing we give the green light for borrowing now, and that the items in contention, where the government, in my opinion, has not provided adequate clarification on yet are ancillary matters which can be dealt with at a later date without risking us delaying the timetable at this point. And the fact remains, sir, that if further on down the line it transpires that the £550 million limit is not appropriate and we will require a bit more, there is nothing whatsoever to stop the government coming back to this assembly, making the case, convincing us and getting that approval from us, approval which will be forthcoming if and only if they can make a satisfactory case in favour of it. This is about this assembly taking control over this, having this matter kept in our hands rather than signing it off to a government who right now there are legitimate concerns may not be able to account for all of this funding adequately. And it is not the job of this assembly to act as a rubber stamping chamber for whatever the government asks us to do. The job that we have been given by our constituents is to represent them first and foremost as members of this assembly, and part of that duty is to hold the government to account and, when it deserves so, to rebuke it. It is not simply to allow ourselves to get fed up, ourselves to get ground down by all of the information, all of the debates, going back and forth on everything in the way that this assembly so often does, and then eventually to just give up and say we can't be bothered to scrutinise this any further, we'll just let the government get on with it. We have to strike the right balance in allowing them to undertake those projects which clearly are in the public interest, but we also have to safeguard the island's finances, and that means keeping on top of this even when it may be inconvenient to do so. And I want to address part of what Deputy Martin said in her speech, and I have to say she was relatively kind to Reform Jersey in her comments, relative of course, sir. And I make this point that ideologically I have no problem whatsoever with government spending lots of money and borrowing lots of money to pay for that spending. I do not hold the same view expressed by the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer that somehow getting into lots of debt is a betrayal of future generations. He says the day before he cuts support worth £1,000 a year to the most vulnerable families in the UK. I certainly hope our government is taking no lessons on morality from that. And what I want to see is a first-class public health service which is free at the point of need and which is paid for by those according to their means, but who will receive according to their need. That is what I think is the basic principle of my political philosophy and what I want to see come out of any hospital debate. But I'm not prepared to simply be ground down and allow the government at this point to take this decision without the information. So I say to the government that for the rest of this debate, can we please drop this straw man argument that this is about delay or not delay, when it's actually about the veracity of the information we have in front of us so that we can adequately do our job, whatever side of politics you're on, whatever party you're in, or whatever relationship you have with this government, a previous government, or any potential future one as well. But the last point I'm going to make, sir, is that I have to say I do find myself getting angry when the view is expressed, as it has been several times in this debate, and it has been connected to this argument about delay or not delay, because I don't think it would be relevant otherwise, about repeating the desires of the incredible staff who work in our health service for us to just get on with it, something which I would anticipate at least 99% of us agree and respect, to say that the views of those workers are important when they happen to align with what the government wants to do, but when it comes to the extremely important issue of pay and terms and conditions for our public sector workers and our healthcare workers, that in the past, many of those who are now praying in aid their views back then had their fingers in their ears and weren't prepared to listen to them, when we know that not all of the problems that our health service face are to do with the building in which they're operating in. They also have serious recruitment issues, which are connected to their pay and terms and conditions, the culture in the health department, and yes, also, sir, the cost of housing, which is the #1 issue that I get islanders coming to me about to say is one of the things that affects their professional ambitions in this island and whether they wish to stay here. So, sir, if you care about what they say when it comes to the type of hospital that we have and the services that are available in it and all of that, which we absolutely should do, please let us also listen to them when it comes to the pay and terms and conditions and opportunities that those brilliant staff deserve to have make to have our health service and ultimately the people of this island benefit from their expertise and their professionalism. I simply have to call out what I see as hypocrisy there, sir, where their views are relevant in the context of this debate, when it's portrayed as a debate on delay or not delay, when it's not a debate on that, but their views are irrelevant when it comes to supporting them directly. So I urge members to support the proposition from the scrutiny panel. I urge the government to take that as a strong message from this assembly, holding them to account to say that those previous debates on site selection and all the rest of it are over and must be over, so that we don't continue to waste tens of millions of pounds with nothing to show for it. But that this assembly and the people of Jersey deserve better when it comes to the detail, when we're talking about such a substantial amount of money to take on as debt. They must come back to us with a greater explanation, reprofiling where it's appropriate and where it can deliver better value for money, but that detail so that we who have been entrusted by the public to represent them can feel confident going ahead. That does not prevent them from doing the work that is immediate, which I would hope most of us support. So, members, I urge my colleagues to vote in favour of this amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Gorst.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if there's too much sun here in St. Juan. Can I first apologise to members that I'm not able to join them in the chamber. I've just returned from the United Kingdom this morning and I'm awaiting my test result. And even though I am light green, sir, I didn't think you'd thank me for attending upon the assembly whilst I waited for my result. Sir, I have supported the hospital in so many different guises that I've forgotten how many times I've voted poor to keep going. I think we had the first iteration of potential 2 sites where the then Treasury Minister wisely limited the overall budget and 2 sites were considered perhaps able to deliver a hospital. Interestingly, one of those 2 sites was the Overdale site. But then we had an election and members of the public felt uncomfortable with the 2 site option. So back to the drawing board we went. I supported, and I apologise to the Constable of St Helier for this, I supported a hospital going onto People's Park. But when it came to it, there was a very successful campaign seeking to remove that from being a possible site of a hospital. And some of my ministerial colleagues who will be making arguments to keep going today voted to stop, or were going to vote to stop that site, sir. Then we went to the existing site and there was a proposal to build what was in effect a new hospital surrounding the existing site, and I voted on a number of occasions to say yes to a new hospital on that site. It didn't and wasn't successful in gaining planning approval, and there was lots of public disquiet about the implications to those continuing to need to be in hospital whilst work was undertaken. And in common with the other preferred sites, there were clarion calls that told us that each time a site had been allocated, there was a cheaper one round the corner. And each time that argument has been made, it has, unsurprising to me, been proven to be incorrect. I well recall a certain member who's no longer in the Assembly suggesting that the proposal for a hospital on the Gloucester Street site was so excessively expensive that the then government wouldn't even have been able to organise a pleasant drinks reception in a brewery, because they had been speaking to somebody who'd spoken to somebody who knew somebody's brother. So all of these people always seem to live on the continent. I'm not sure if there's a common thread there. So who could do it for several 100 million less? And so we went back to the drawing board, knowing, of course, that there was a strong political commitment for the Overdale site. And we've come round again, and the Overdale site has been voted on, and I have voted poor to build a hospital on the Overdale site. Every time progress has been made on building a new hospital, voices have been heard that have said that the site is not perfect, that actually there is a better site. And of course, all of the things that were known several years ago about the Overdale site, of course, have come to fruition. They should be no surprise to anyone. It's a substantial hospital on a hill that needs reasonably substantial roadworks to deal with the access issues. And of course, wisely, I think the current minister and the current oversight group have felt that creating a mental health unit and actually creating now a campus health facility was the better way forward. And when one wishes to build a hospital at Overdale, one shouldn't be of the nature which is now proposed, which, as I say, is a campus proposal. It's no surprise to me, and I suspect it's little surprise to many, that it's going to cost more than a different form of a hospital that could have been started had planning permission finally been received a number of years earlier. And yet, sir, I do understand why we are hearing again those two arguments about, I wonder if there's a better site. Thankfully, we haven't heard that in the Assembly today. But the argument to stop the progress today is an argument that the hospital is too expensive. That argument we have heard, or I have heard, on every other possible iteration of building a new hospital. So I must say that this perhaps is a confession too far. I've enjoyed reading the scrutiny panel's report and the Curry and Brown report, because they themselves have reminded us of some of the history. And I do think it is important that today we don't base our decisions and make our arguments about personalities. But I do think it is good to remind ourselves that some colleagues today are making a completely different argument than they have made in the past. And for me, there is no point in us questioning that, why they have changed their arguments and their minds. Rather, sir, I ask the question, were they right previously, or are they right now? And I think, sir, heartened by the understanding that a lot of members now have, that if we are to deliver this mammoth project, it needs slow and steady progress, and it needs a substantial budget. That is what ministers are asking the Assembly to make today. To continue with the slow and steady progress, and to allow ministers to work within what is, without doubt, a substantial budget. So I think, so those that were against in the past but are now in favour of making that progress, I think they are right now, sir. So I think it's well known, sir, that I don't like borrowing. Unlike the previous speaker that I am pleased to follow, I do not hold with the philosophy that government should borrow lots and spend lots. And my colleagues will tell you, sir, that I have been very much a lone voice in challenging the level of borrowing. And that has been difficult for me, because we have the borrowing proposal for the hospital before us today, and we have borrowing suggested in the government plan to cover the COVID debt, and we have other substantial borrowing suggested in the government plan as well. And I've had a frank discussion with my colleagues, and I find myself making a difficult decision. I think, I accept, I see the rationale and the good financial practice that borrowing for assets is. So borrowing for capital investment in a low interest environment where one has got a rising strategic reserve income makes good sense. I, sir, have always been concerned about the overall level of government borrowing. And I have said to my colleagues that in supporting this borrowing for the hospital, which is the right thing for all of the reasons that Senator Farnham and colleagues have outlined, makes it then difficult for me to support the borrowing in the government plan. But so that is not a debate for today. That is a debate that we will have together later this year. And therefore, sir, I understand all of the arguments that those members have made about borrowing. But we must take the amount in the round. Is it right to borrow for the hospital, for a capital investment, to keep this programme moving forward and to finally start to see some light at the end of the tunnel of building a hospital? The only logical conclusion, which I think is in the best interest of all islanders, is yes. But in doing so, sir, I put members on notice that that means I can't support the borrowing in the government plan. And I ask all of those members who are concerned about borrowing to think about that same position. There are coherent arguments about why we should borrow for the hospital for this capital investment. And if they are, as they've articulated so eloquently, against high levels of borrowing for all the reasons articulated, I ask them, sir, to support this borrowing and this movement forward, and think again about the borrowing in the government plan. We've heard a lot today, sir, about controls over the differential between what will become the strike price for the building and the fitting out. That's of course not just the building of the hospital, but also the education centre, the mental health centre and the car parking centre. And appropriate contingencies that any project of this scale must have. And members of the Assembly are right to raise those matters as they have done today. And they are right to raise concerns about them, as ministers have done, and as we in Treasury have done, as the Treasurer himself has done, and as the Political Oversight Group recognise that as this project moves forward and a strike price is firmed up, the controls required over the two different amounts will be enhanced. The control framework will be improved, and the requirement for sign off by both the Minister and the Political Oversight Group will be enhanced as well. Because it is incredibly important that we do not spend, the saying is a penny, sir, but I think probably in this instance we shall say a pound. We do not spend a pound more than we need to. But those who've been involved in projects, any sort of building projects, be it from an extension at home, there is always a pressure to spend more than the original strike price. There's always a pressure to change a layout. In a hospital, there's always a pressure from the users to want to change something or upgrade something or change the flow. That all costs money. And therefore, I take confidence from the enhanced controls, the enhanced processes that Treasury will be putting in place over those different amounts, that this project, if continued to be managed carefully, can be delivered and not require a decision of the states again to increase that 804 budget. I am committed. I know other ministers are as well. But I think as members know my scepticism, I am committed to working with the political oversight group and fellow ministers to make sure that we don't spend a pound more than we need to. A project of this nature in a small community is always going to be difficult and cause feelings to run high. And I understand that. And I think, sir, the speeches that we've heard today have been excellent in articulating the dangers that lie ahead. But I have come to the conclusion that rather than stopping or stalling or asking the political oversight group and the officers to go back and rethink things now, which we know from experience costs more, that on balance, with the support of Treasury officials, not supporting the scrutiny amendment, but moving forward with the government's proposals is the right thing. There are, of course, those schools of thought about just getting something done, and that is very powerful. And it is right that we should be getting the hospital done. But we should only get it done with the correct controls and the correct processes in place. Scrutiny rightly have highlighted areas where that can be improved, and I think that ministers accept that. But I don't, on balance, see any reason or think the case has been made for us to stop now and to not keep moving forward. But as I've said earlier, sir, when it comes to the government plan, I will be singing a different song. So I ask members to think very, very carefully before they press their button to halt this project. And I ask them not to, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Do you give way for a point of clarification from Deputy Tadier?
So I do, because it will allow me just to mention something I said in the chat I would mention in relation to Deputy Morell's question to the Attorney General, sir, which I've written a note on but just forgotten to cover, as is my wont. Yes, sir, I do.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, sir. I don't know if it will allow the Senator to do that because he's finished his speech, but that's for you, sir. But my point of clarification is to ask, he said that he didn't favour borrowing to fund the hospital, but so he hasn't clarified how he would want to see the hospital project, the £804 million paid for. Could he clarify that?
No, sir, I was very clear. I said that I did support the borrowing for the hospital. It was the other borrowing in the government plan that I didn't support, and it's supporting the borrowing for the hospital, I don't believe gives rise. Sorry, so I've got a call coming in. Gives rise to the concerns that Deputy Morell raised. Borrowing is a contract between the government of Jersey and those who are taking up the bond, market makers, and is not in any way connected with the United Kingdom government. And we should not expect the United Kingdom government to intervene, or nor should we expect Jersey ministers to ask the United Kingdom government to intervene. That would be wholly constitutionally inappropriate, sir. Thank you.
So you said that Well, you have made that point, so there's nothing further, I think. Thank you very much. Conor St Martin.
Thank you, sir. If this amendment is accepted, the can will not be kicked down the road unless the government decide to do that. This can should not be kicked down the road, not at all. I feel in this debate that I have a gun held to my head. If I don't support the government spending 804 million, then we won't have the hospital. Really? This is a democracy. We should be able to have well-researched, alternative and legitimate views and still have a new hospital. I have no interest whatsoever in delaying this hospital or risking more years at Gloucester Street. Like other members, I believe in and support the need for a new hospital. I support Overdale as a site. We need to invest in our island's future. We can all agree about that. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, this has been a problem of leadership. The government has simply not delivered on this in the way they should have. The Deputy Chief Minister has not delivered as he should have. There's not been the clarity that a project of this magnitude deserves. Problems have occurred, not just with this government, but with the previous government. And this Assembly has inherited a myriad of problems resulting from the last government and their own failings in the provision of a new hospital. In an ideal world, this Assembly should not have had to deal with any of these problems. But here we are in October 2021. I may oppose the government on this amendment today, but I thoroughly support, as I've said, I thoroughly support the building of the hospital, and I support a hospital that does not rely on a ridiculous sum for contingency of 73 million. Everyone knows that give a project large funds for contingency, and I know this from doing my smaller projects in the parish, the contingency will be spent. And that'll be spent and probably will be asked for even more. This amendment realistically caps the spending. Remember, experts use and see contingency funds as a budget. This project team are asking for 804.5 million, when by their own admission, the hospital can be built for 301.3 million, plus 179.5 million for equipment, land acquisition, contingencies, etc., making a total of 408.8 million, allowing for a further 69.2 million to take the total up to 550 million. So the question is, what is the extra 250 million needed for? If we can build the hospital for 550 million, then we only have to take out one bond and the island will be in a more financially secure position. And there is money to pay for frontline medical staff and patient care. I was already concerned about what is missing from the proposed 804.5 million hospital in terms of facilities and departments. For 804 million, we still have no rehabilitation ward, no physiotherapy or occupational therapy or hydrotherapy pool. As yet, no long-term plan as to where child development, speech and language and memory clinic will be, etc., etc. I was saddened when the Minister for Health, who I respect, said this morning that if we do not, or hinted that if we do not support the government spending 804 million, then infertility and maternity services will be at risk. Why suddenly jump on women's healthcare services? Why not the car park, the road, or something else? Surely, if the 804 million pounds hospital and the debt this incurs goes ahead, infertility and maternity services should be paramount, as we will need all these babies to be born to grow up to continue to pay this debt for years to come. I may oppose the government on this spending today, but I do want to see something good come out of this. Regardless of the outcome today, we need to do our best to put down the divisive rhetoric bubbling over the future hospital. Once the Assembly decides today, we should accept it. Whatever the Assembly decides today, we should accept it and begin to look at the new opportunities we will not only receive from this project, but the opportunities left over from the hospital we leave behind. We will be moving to Overdale, whichever way this vote goes. So let's have the vision to use the Gloucester Street site. Let's create new green spaces. And let's have a cultural centre or something like that. Please let us be able to say by June 2022 that this cohort has achieved something, that we as States members no, not just what we want to do and where we're going with Overdale, but what we want to use, but know how, sorry, my writing is terrible. Be able to say by June 2022 that we as States members, this cohort, know not just what we want to do and where we are going with Overdale, but what we want to use, what we leave behind us. I'd urge you to please support this amendment. Thank you.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. And I'm really pleased to follow the previous speaker. I came here with an open mind today and wanting to balance the evidence that scrutiny have given us with what ministers are presenting, and completely open to being persuaded, sir. But there was a turning point in the debate for me today, and it was when I listened to the health minister's speech, and the previous speaker mentioned this. But I will say it again. I was shocked and actually quite disgusted that the direct implication from the health minister was suggesting that if we do not vote with the government today, then maternity services and paediatric services would suffer in the future. And we've all had members of the public and ministers lobbying us, and I do listen to everyone, but what I will not listen to is being held to ransom over the things that I thought were shared priorities of this assembly. And many people have used this phrase, holding a gun to our head, and this isn't holding a gun to our head, but it's holding a gun to the heads of mothers, babies and children in our island, and it actually smacks of desperation. And it was at that point that I started to wonder why our government resorting to such tactics instead of relying on the weight of the evidence that they have. It doesn't fill me with confidence that the government has control of this project in a measured way. And those plans for maternity and paediatrics are not concrete yet, sir. I haven't seen any concrete plans. I've seen vague outlines. And I want to make it clear to ministers today that the public of this island have taken them at their word when they committed to putting children first, and that babies and children must be prioritised in the new hospital, and they must not be used as political pawns in this way. Speaking of politics, I'm not a member who has been particularly politically entrenched one way or the other, as in any of the hospital debates that we've had. And I know that there are others like me in the Assembly that identify that way and who may even still be weighing up the arguments today. And I just want to remind those members that, and it has been said today, and it's also been argued that the evidence isn't there, but scrutiny is based on evidence. It's not just a panel of politicians. Senator Valois summarised perfectly the advisor report, which is, again, I have read that in detail and I found that really useful. And yes, concerns may have been raised by submissions, which that's one type of evidence, but that advisor report does provide us as an assembly with an objective view. And scrutiny is such an important function, which I, for one, really value. And sometimes it amazes me how often as an assembly we decide to kind of waste the resources, the public resources that we put into scrutiny and into paying for things like expert advisors, and we don't listen to them. So I think, if there are members who are still deciding on this, and I think we do need to put ourselves outside of this dichotomy of am I team scrutiny or team government, and think of ourselves as members of an assembly, as a collective, then surely we must understand that the scrutiny function is there to aid us in our decision making and look at their reports and the advisor's report in that light. And we must take their findings into account. I think it would be foolhardy of us not to. They're not saying throw the project out. They're not saying delay it. They are simply saying, and again, Senator Mezik's speech was really helpful in this regard. They're saying that this is the amount of money we're prepared to commit to based upon the evidence of what we have seen from the business case, which has been analysed by respected expert advisors and compared with other jurisdictions against industry standards. So I haven't heard much today that has persuaded me that the hospital project needs that larger amount. So based upon the evidence, sir, presently I'm minded to support the amendment based upon a logical consideration of that evidence that's been presented.
Very much, Deputy. Conetaba Trinity.
Thank you, sir. I start by saying to members that, in my opinion, with the debate today, we are in the last chance saloon. This is our third attempt at delivering a new fit-for-purpose hospital for the people of Jersey. I don't intend to dwell on the reasons how we've arrived at the situation we find ourselves, only to say that if we don't go ahead now, the realistic possibility of attracting a delivery team for a fourth or fifth attempt at some future date, to say the least, is remote. Be under no illusion, the major international contractors with the skills and expertise to deliver a project of this size and complexity are commercially motivated. Their first consideration will be a decision whether to commit the substantial investment in time and resources required to prepare a tender. This decision will be balanced against the risks and likelihood of success that opportunity presents. How exciting do we think the remote prospect of delivering Jersey's new hospital will be considered at a fourth or fifth time of asking? Will they be lining up, banging on our door, or more likely take the view that our community, this assembly, cannot decide what colour pants to put on in the morning, never mind where to go when and what to build every time we decide to waste more millions planning and only debating a new hospital? This lack of confidence may have already played a part this time, with the short list of potential partners who expressed an interest. I'm not suggesting for a moment that Rock FCC are not the right partner, just that we are fishing in an ever-reducing pool of talent. Ask yourself, why would anyone waste their time and effort again when there are better opportunities with a better chance of success elsewhere? 804.5 million is a frightening amount of money, and I would be in denial if I said it did not concern me. But I take comfort from the advice of our Treasury team and professional advisors. Like many others, I understand the argument about the legacy debt we are placing on our future generations. But these are the generations who will benefit most if we commit to invest now. After all, they are our children and grandchildren. Do they not deserve 21st century healthcare? Is that not putting children first? If this hospital is delivered, yes, the balance sheet will have a substantial debt on one side, but on the other will be assets with immeasurable value for the health provision into the future for our community. There are a few who would advocate that we continue to do nothing and let our clinicians and staff struggle with the present rapidly deteriorating hospital and health estate. This is a situation that I cannot reconcile. In the middle ground, we have those who realise we need a new hospital, but would prefer a much smaller and much cheaper cottage hospital, similar to that which would serve a similar sized community in the UK. The fundamental difference being they have readily easy access to larger district hospitals and specialist centres that we do not. Do we really want a facility where it's fine if you've got a broken limb that needs setting in plaster, or perhaps a few stitches, or some other minor procedure? Or do we want a general hospital where our community and our loved ones can receive a full range of clinical services and healthcare appropriate for Jersey here on island? The alternative will see an increasing number of emergency flights out with patients who require urgent special care. And I, for one, wouldn't want my loved ones waiting at the airport for the fog to clear so that flight can get away. Much is made of why do we need to cater for consultants and their private patients. Well, I'm afraid we must live in the real world. And if we want the best clinicians to invest their skills and their working lives here in Jersey, they will expect a modern, well-equipped facility and the opportunity to practice privately and develop their skills. Otherwise, they're simply going to go elsewhere. The opportunity that is before us today is the result of an incredible amount of design and engineering work, extensive consultation with users, now supported by the clinicians and nursing staff, and I believe we should embrace the opportunity and let's move forward. You only need to look at the way projected costs have escalated since the two-site proposal rejected in 2014 and Gloucester Street in 2017. Although there are no straight comparisons between the various proposals, this today is the complete package on a single site. With inflation, there's really no surprise how it's now costing circa 800 million. Just to address the figure which has been bandied about the 9.5% for overheads and profit. This really shouldn't be viewed together. Overheads are the cost of running the site, running the contractor's offices, the plant, materials, the labour that cannot be allocated to specific tasks. And anyone in their right mind would not come to Jersey and expect that margin to be as low as 5.5%. All that any further delay will achieve is more abortive and spiral delivery costs. Even worse will be the irreparable damage to the morale of our most valuable asset, the dedicated team of health professionals who work so hard day in and day out to deliver first-class healthcare despite our existing, antiquated, inefficiently laid out hospital, which is creaking at the seams and ever increasingly expensive to maintain. I speak as a member of the Political Oversight Group, who've been supported throughout the development of our proposed new hospital by Government of Jersey team, together with medical and construction advisors, and through a programme of extensive consultation. I can assure members that the Oversight Group have challenged, and I certainly have challenged, when we have been presented with timescales and costs, and I still continue to do that work. With the inbuilt flexibility of design, the hospital at Overdale will cater for continued development in healthcare delivery now and well into the future. I cannot support the amendment from the Future Hospital Review Panel. This amendment would risk us being left with the funding only sufficient to do half a job, and in my opinion, half a job that will never happen. This amendment, however dressed up, is nothing short of a wrecking motion and will spell the end of the Our Hospital project. It offers no credible alternatives, so it is back to the drawing board and will be a waste of effort to continue with a planning application in November because we do not have the funding. Do we keep the delivery partner hanging on, treading water at great expense for the next 18 months or 2 years, whilst a new assembly has another go at cracking this nut? Well, my guess is they'll be on the first boat out in the morning. I ask members, are we really going to risk kicking this can down the road again today? We have north of 70 million costs on the clock for this and previous failed attempts to deliver a new hospital. Will we leave here today with nothing to show for it? Please not. It's time for us to set aside our differences, unite in a common goal for the benefit of our healthcare professionals, the island community and future generations to deliver a new fit for hospital for the people of Jersey. Thank you, sir.
Much, Deputy Lehegerup.
Thank you, sir. When seeking election 3 years ago and asked regularly where I would like to see the new hospital built, I said I had no preferred option. I still don't today, although I realise that there are challenges at Overdale which weren't at the time properly explained to us all. Today's debate is purely that of funding. As part of the Scrutiny Future Hospital Review Panel, I've participated in briefings, public hearings on a number of occasions and have asked questions about size, facilities, equipment and reasons why certain decisions have been made. As we arrive at today, for me, there are still gaps in the plan which I am still not satisfied with. Why an increase in private beds when we have done no consultation on if those wishing to take this option will choose to have treatment in Jersey or travel to the UK or elsewhere? No business case has been provided. And sir, I'm fully aware that a number of local firms provide this as a facility, but people will still choose a consultant that's not on island. Members have spoken about building this hospital for all islanders. And in fact, one was surprised that Reform was supporting this amendment. Yet, sir, we see an increase in the private wing, but we see no facility for Child Development and Therapy Centre, which we visited last week and have an excellent facility already at Overdale. They will move out to Lekeneve for 5 years. And sir, they are not due to come back. And actually, sir, they don't know where they're going either. So when we were all told we needed a one-site hospital, because I had actually in the past said I thought that 2 sites seemed to make sense. But we said, no, we have to have a one-site hospital. This is not a one-site hospital, sir, because otherwise, if it was a one-site hospital, child development would be returning there, but it is not. No resolution in relation to the road, in my view, as other options were available. No site for the bowling club, no parking for businesses in the area, no indication on when, if those matters will be resolved. We still sit hanging, sir, with no problem solved. A large car parking facility. Yes, it has been reduced. We've asked question after question after question. We get an answer, sir. We're looking at it, but nothing else. At all junctions, we have been told that we are having a world-class hospital and we want to be innovative. However, we are only a small island community with only a limited workforce and an ageing population. In my view, we should be building a hospital suitable for our needs, size of population and budget, which is reasonable and affordable. We have no idea what the facilities management costs will be for this hospital. We're being asked to burden our children and grandchildren with a debt that no one can reassure me that is sustainable for us. No information as to the resources that will be required to run this new hospital and how we will recruit and retain those staff. We currently have already vacancies within the health service, and only in early July we had to cancel elective surgery due to the shortage of staff within the theatres. This level of funding for infrastructure poses a question to the Minister, sir. How is the Minister proposing to fund meaningful pay increases for both hospital and other states' employees if we spend so much on infrastructure and with a substantial debt for the next 35 to 40 years? Because no doubt when pay discussions come in, sir, employees will be told that there's no more money.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member, oh yes, Chief Minister, oh no, I beg your pardon, Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Oops, and just to prove I'm here. Yes, there I am. Before I start, yes, I'm well aware that we desperately need a new hospital. When I was chairman of PAC, we looked at the Jersey Property Holdings way back in, I don't know, 2007, 8, 9. I'm aware of the sewage in the basement and the dire state of the IT situation. On the other hand, we need a good general hospital with room for expansion, not a world-class hospital, although I see it's now described as a first-class hospital, so it's come down a grade. Members should be aware of my views on what the island needs in terms of a health service. I outlined these in the email I sent round to members over the weekend. If you haven't by any chance read my email, may I request that you look at it overnight, because this debate is obviously going to carry on overnight or tomorrow. These current plans make no provision for such services as a step-down facility, formerly known as a... Somebody's got their microphone on. Will they please turn it off?
I'm sorry, Senator, we can't hear anything other than you speaking.
Oh, I can hear somebody spluttering in the background. Oh well. Yeah, there it is again. These current plans make no provision for such services as a step-down facility, formerly known as a convalescent home, but a great deal more use than the Jersey Care model. But that's a debate for another day. I do know a bit about hospitals. My mother worked in the pre-war system as a physio, and my two of my sisters were radiographers working in the 50s and 60s before the private wings were abolished by Barbara Castle. Yesterday, the Deputy Chief Minister was quite explicit that there were a significant number of detailed plans in preparation for the formal planning application. These must be very recent, as a concerned member of the public reported to me that he had visited the ROC offices recently and asked to see more detailed drawings as he had points to raise, and he was told that there were no drawings. Deputy Martin referred to the lack of facilities for staff. Well, these have been stopped over the last few years to save money. You know, there's no, if you're on night duty, you have to bring your own sandwiches, which doesn't seem quite right to me. Yesterday, the Deputy Chief Minister was, the Statistics Unit has submitted a report on GDP and GVA this week. GDP fell by 9.2% and GVA by 8.7%. It's extremely unlikely that the economy will be firing on all cylinders immediately, particularly as productivity also fell by 8% in 2020. The mayhem caused by the recent ill-advised and ignorant attempts to streamline the states, which we are still trying to sort out, will do nothing to improve productivity. As I said in my email to all states members last week, the first step is to have an efficient system. Improving productivity is not reducing the budget, but streamlining procedures within HCS. If you improve efficiency, the cost will fall away. It should also be noted that the recent large hospital projects have all come in over budget and over time, which suggests that there's an over-optimistic optimism bias. For instance, the new Liverpool hospital needed to be bailed out by the UK government. If you think 800 million sounds high, wait until you add another 200 to 300 million. And this is before we have a properly defined IT or workforce strategy. We also need to remember that the Chinese company Evergrande, the property company, and other large Chinese companies are currently financially unstable. President Biden has an enormous spending program planned, thereby increasing the US deficit. Energy prices are skyrocketing in Europe, with the prices putting the lower income earners into fuel poverty and giving them the choice of heat or eat. Against this uncertain background and flimsy evidence, we are being asked to sign a blank check. The problem is exacerbated by the fact that we know neither the precise costings of the build nor the estimated running costs of the hospital. We are told that we should have a larger private patients wing so we can increase our private patients market. But there's no independent business case for this. It is only just now being prepared. The question is it a genuinely independent piece of market research, or is it just a justification for the idea? Is it based on evidence of market trends and market research? The employment of specialized surgeons in private practice implies that there will be sufficient demand for their specialties so that they can keep in practice. I think it's about 200 operations a year or something like that. In most cases, there is insufficient demand to keep these specialized surgeons in practice. It is more cost effective to send patients to selected UK or French hospitals for treatment. And it also means that patients will have access to the latest up-to-date procedures. Considering the underlying financing strategy, this intends to finance the hospital through borrowing in the context of the Council of Ministers policy on financing and the Minister for Treasury and Resources wider debt strategy, and modifying the objectives of the strategic reserve to finance and manage the servicing and repayment of debt and the directly associated costs of doing so. Yeah, well, it's a bit of a mouthful, that. However, critical to this approach is the use of the strategic reserve as the platform to pay both bond debt repayment and coupon costs through arbitrage on investment returns arising from the strategic fund reserve fund balances. This necessitates leveraging an expected arbitrage between investment returns, which are estimated to yield an expected annual minimum of 4.6% based on RPI at 2.6% and 2% growth. Annual coupon costs of 2% are envisaged, so a positive performance totaling 6.6% on investment returns is critical. Putting it simply, it is proposed to put the bond proceeds, which we receive when the bonds are sold, immediately into the strategic reserve and rely on the investment performance of 4.6% plus 2%, i.e. 6.6%, to be able to provide the required return to cover the target performance of the strategic reserve plus the coupon due on the bond. This assumes that future performance will continue the exceptional market performance which we've had over the past few years. Given the economic problems emerging in China, America, and Europe, not to mention the rest of the world, this is unlikely. Nevertheless, it is intended to adopt a more aggressive approach to investing in order to achieve the returns required. These are the twin objectives of debt coupon repayment and maintaining as a tracker measure the strategic reserve at a level equivalent to the economic gross value added. But the GVA has fallen significantly and productivity has also fallen. These vital measures will not recover quickly given the general economic outlook. And frankly, I'm not sure that anyone in the state's organisation really understands how to improve productivity. I know a man who does, but that's another story. We have been assured that the return is achievable, but this more aggressive approach implies a strategy that will attract higher risk. And this approach brings forward a behaviour of borrowing in advance of need without actually knowing the overall project cost or running costs of the asset being created. The lack of an estimate of running costs in the outline business case is the most serious failure and undermines the credibility of the formulation of the Our Hospital project. As I've said, we are relying on a continuation of the excellent investment performance of the past few years, despite the fact that the world economic background is extremely uncertain. The problem is that if you are relying on superior investment performance to meet particular expenditure, it is risky. If you are doing it with borrowed money, it is even more risky. And in this instance, we're just putting too many eggs in one small basket. If at this level of borrowing we fail to meet our goals, we could jeopardize any future projects needing borrowing, like the new excuse me, like the new property for the state's offices, and it will probably affect our credit rating. And in fact, the Deputy Chief Minister has already said that he is expecting the credit rating to be reduced. The only question is, by how much? Not to mention the fact that the States has a consistent record of capital programme slippage. So borrowing in advance of need, not knowing how much we really need, will attract additional unnecessary risks as well as costs. Treasury have said that assets owned by the States of Jersey could be sold to bridge any gap on affordability on bond repayment. As Evergrande Property, the Chinese company, is finding, the possibility of financial problems immediately reduces the sale value of those assets. It becomes a fire sale. It also means that the proceeds of sales cannot be used for projects to benefit the public who, as taxpayers, originally funded the assets. So here we are. We have seen no detailed drawings, and we are being asked to agree a maximum budget with no building costing, and we have no proper estimates of running costs. What is worse, we are in effect borrowing more than the annual total tax take for the bailiwick, and we are taking a risky approach with our investment strategy against a decidedly uncertain economic background. Please support the Corporate Services Amendment, which limits the budget to a more realistic level. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Let's turn the camera on. So, in the long term, we are all dead. And yet we still plant trees for the future. We don't know whether winter will kill them off or whether there'll be a drought, but we still plant them. We put plans in place usually to look after them whilst they grow, for the next generation and the generations to come. And that is what we are being asked to do today. Frankly, this amendment feels like we are not prepared to look to the future. I've heard, for example, I've heard comments about the conditions that our staff work in, the difficulties of attracting staff, etc., etc. And I agree absolutely with that. But I can guarantee that having poor facilities will not attract the future talent that we will need. This is an incredibly important debate. This is about an island need and the future health of islanders. It should not be about short-term political expediency or, for example, about voting against me as the current Chief Minister or the current government just to give them a kicking. This is about the next 40 years, the next 10 governments, and the next 3 generations. It's about those who do come after us and those who depend on our wise choices now to secure their future. And yes, there are large sums involved. But we do have a plan A, if you like, to ensure that these are affordable without putting up taxes and without threatening future generations. And there are also supportive measures which go over and above the main proposals, which I will refer to as Plan B and C, and which I will address later. But I want to try and boil this debate down to the simple points, and I don't believe I'm prone to exaggeration. And hopefully I'm not prone to overselling either. We need to be very clear as to the consequences of this amendment. Not about the amendment itself, it's the consequences of this amendment. And in essence, it stops this project. That's it, stone dead. Takes it out of the hands of this Assembly and exposes it to yet further political uncertainty by putting it into the hands of the next Assembly. And that's because I'm talking about delay. Now, let's be clear, some members want that. I think the Progress Party want to go backwards, in my view, to Gloucester Street. Reform Party seem to be, frankly, trying to have their cake and eat it. And by that, I mean, it's about confusion over outcomes. And it is all very well saying, I want it to go ahead, but then take away a third of the budget. That doesn't work. Members cannot have it both ways. Either we reject the amendment and move forward, we dither, we delay for all sorts of reasons, and either eventually compromise Islanders' health or just add further cost. Now, I've said in the past that this is a generational debate, and I make no apologies for repeating what I said a couple of weeks ago. Because what I was minded about where we are now is the decisions that this Assembly, or rephrase that, our predecessors in this chamber, have made, for example, around social security. When I recall, or I believe, it's certainly before my time, that coffins were carried into the Royal Square to demonstrate the anger of the populace at that time. And what I said as well is that, can you imagine a world today without pensions or benefits? I'm reminded actually, and this goes from my father's day in this Assembly, when actually the big debate of the day was Queen's Valley. And I can remember being told by him, and I can't remember how old I was at the time, that he was told by the professionals advising them that and I think it was in 1976, this related to, in 1976 when we had the drought and the hot summers, we were hours away from running out of water. Here we have a hospital where we have been told that in about 5 years' time, the state of that hospital will be sufficiently bad that we may have to start closing bits of it. That's not a gun to a head. That's being honest and straightforward. And if any member tries to say later that we did not say that these are the consequences of this amendment and I did not know, then I'm spelling it out really, really clearly. Now, I have a confession to make. I've never built a hospital. I doubt there's anybody in this room that has built a hospital. I suspect the Conotava Trinity is probably the closest we have. Not on a hospital, but on development. I can say I have built some things. I've built some things, I say personally, involving builders, and I've been in organisations that are presently spending many millions of pounds to build things. So I have a limited understanding. That does not make me an expert. What I will endeavour to do later is clarify some of the confusion that seems to have arisen, and I'm going to pick out Deputy Ward and Deputy Gardner in relation to costs that seem to, the confusion that seems to have arisen. Let's deal with the proposition. The proposition focuses on two areas. One is the amount of borrowing, the other is the overall costs, and the two are intrinsically inseparable. The proposer is seeking to cap the cost to up to 550 million, including client contingency, optimism bias, and site-specific costs. Now, so that's quite a specific figure. And I actually was looking forward to the report to see how the panel was going to save me as a taxpayer around £200 million, whilst not impairing my future health needs or that of my family. And I was slightly more intrigued when the report of the amendment made it very clear that what the panel is not doing is specifying to the Assembly or the hospital POB exactly how this is to be achieved or what should be removed. I was kind of looking for evidence. There is nothing. So I eagerly awaited the report. Equally, there is nothing in there that justifies a project figure of up to £550 million. The only comment from any of the professional advisors is the following. Should the revised cash envelope be determined as an example at approximately 550 million, and then it goes on about the strategic reserve, could still have an excess of approximately 550 million at the outset, and the integrity of the purpose of the SRF preserved. So this is purely an accounting exercise. That is the only evidence I can find or advice from any of the professional advisors that remotely mentions a figure of £550 million that this Assembly is being asked to vote on today. So, yeah, we could drop the mental health unit. That'll take out, what, £40–50 million. Would we really want to put the maternity unit back to the Labar Centre? Probably not, but so I'm exaggerating. But I would have expected for something this fundamental a change for there to be evidence of what this would entail or how it was properly arrived at. There is none. And I will come to standards later that inform the costs and why the costs have gone up, by the way. Now I quote two paragraphs from the other advisors of the panel. At this stage of early cost estimating, this margin of cost variance is not unusual, and it is not significant within the overall scale of the project, and can be seen as an opportunity to target cost reductions through the robust target value design approach being implemented by the project team. Whilst the justification for the full scale of accommodation is yet to be provided, the costs presented for the RIBA Stage 2 design are realistic and robust. The point about that is at the stage we are at, these costs are realistic. So I repeat, realistic and robust. So again, where is the evidence in the scrutiny report to justify exactly what to take off to the tune of £200 million? And I could not find anything. And remember, the scrutiny advisor has said there is a robust process already in place about looking at value and being run by our present team. And actually, that's where, for example, Senator Gorse was, is about how we keep control of that contingency. We're not in disagreement about this, by the way. We do want to keep those costs under control. But what we are trying to do is give the flexibility to make sure this project can keep going. I think Senator Gorse's comment was slow and steady, because we've been making really good progress compared to previous schemes. And let's just remember how we got here. There have been a number of iterations for a new hospital, and it first started in 2010 with what might have actually been a refurbishment almost. Then we eventually landed at a 9-year phased development program at Gloucester Street. And those drawings, from recollection, were a block outline. It was not a detailed planning application. It is what we're trying to do, and which, by the way, we're trying to do on the 15th of November of this year. That's about 6 weeks away. So to kind of get the rubber out and start redesigning it ain't going to happen in 6 weeks. So we are talking about delay, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, we didn't actually know on that previous application what we were getting. And most importantly, there was poor engagement with the clinicians, many of whom were highly critical of the scheme. And actually, I will say, because I think it was in my present role, rather than just before that role, I spoke to some of those clinicians quietly who had been very publicly critical. And certainly, and it wasn't many, it's about, I think it was 3 I spoke to, and certainly 2 of them, so I haven't checked on the 3rd one, have very clearly expressed their support for what we're doing now. That, for me, is progress. It's moving things forward. It's getting that right product. And that was one of the big differences as to where we are. And don't forget as well that that previous scheme was rejected twice by 2 separate planning ministers. That was one of the driving forces, I think, behind Deputy Russell Abbey's proposition as to actually bringing a different approach. And I would say that's what we've done. Now, whilst there have been cost comparisons with that older scheme, we know that it didn't include certain key items. And I mean, absolutely very clear, mental health was not included anywhere in that scheme. That 466 is automatically up to above or around 500 million straight away. That was the comparison. And that was back in, I think, 2017. And in fact, the then health minister was actually proposing a separate project towards the end of his term. Now, I can't recall, sir, and actually went back to the scrutiny report of the day, there was an issue around or lack of clarity as to whether, for example, car parking costs were included in there. Digital records were very unclear. We are addressing digital records, by the way. I think hopefully Deputy Peter will address that at some point. And what was also very clear is the proposition itself tied itself up into knots completely. Now, most critically, and this I hope people will listen to, Professor Hander has said on a number of occasions the proposed scheme would have been out of date within 5 to 10 years. And these were his words to me. He didn't need to say them to me. I walked into the council minister's room at some point, and I think it's the 1st or 2nd time I've met him. And he said, we were extremely lucky not to have gone with that scheme. And I said, he didn't have to say that. And basically, he said it would have been out of date. So it's all very well saying, yes, we had this perfect vision from whenever it was, 2017, for, let's say, £500 million. actually it would have been out of date within 5 to 10 years, according to the professionals that advise us. So let's not get into these cost comparisons, because we are looking at 2 different schemes and 2 different levels of quality. Now, so who am I going to believe? I'm afraid I am going to listen to Professor Ashok Panda, a consultant vascular surgeon who actually recently received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the University of Oxford Medical Sciences Teaching Excellence Awards. I'm not going to base my decisions on ill-informed tweets on social media. So we were lucky, we dodged a bullet. Otherwise that budget of at least 466 million, if I exclude mental health, £500 million if I bring it in, would have been wasted. We would have had a building that would not have been fit for purpose. And bear in mind, by the way, it was a 9-year phased development. What would that have been like last year in the middle of the pandemic? Can you imagine running the hospital with a building site and COVID? So I find it incredibly ironic that whilst we are still in a pandemic, we are arguing of what the island needs for future healthcare. And what we have done is we've gone for a bottom-up approach, informed by the clinicians properly, informed by the nursing staff properly, and that has informed our health outcomes. Let's talk about delay here. If this Assembly does vote for this amendment, it will be stopping this project. And why do I say that? Because the rough estimate is it'll take at least 18 months, might be as far as 2 years, with consequent costs to produce something different. I won't go through the list, but basically you have to go back to square one. You have to do the functional brief that then works its all the way up. And by the way, that, let's say 2 years, it assumes we keep the team. If the team walk away, because this is the 3rd iteration, then actually that will be another year. That's 3 years. And this is at the time we had historically low borrowing rates. Don't know, I was going to make a joke, probably not appropriate, but certainly I can never recall rates that have been lower than where we are now. So time and delay almost guarantee that rates will go up, certainly in the next 3 years. And also we know that inflation costs, building costs are going up. And actually, in fact, it was alluded to on one of the TV stations last night by, I think it was Patrick Armstrong. So I apologize for naming, but it was in public domain. How will we get that engagement back with the clinicians? What's the impact on morale going to be here? It's all very well, as we've said, having 100 people out in the Royal Square telling us they don't like the costs. We've had 125, 128 clinicians and nurses writing to us, employing us to actually get on and do this. So, and as I said, I make no apologies for saying it again. We've been advised that in 5 years' time, the management of those facilities will get sufficiently difficult that we will have to contemplate closing things. And basically, it is all about getting us back on that hamster wheel and going round and round and round. And let's be clear, some members, although not saying it at the moment, want to go back to the old site. Now, sir, I know I think some reference has already been made to it, sir, but I will just briefly remind members of parts of the letters that we received. This one from the nurses. Expressing relief that Overdale had been agreed as a site and a turnkey building fit for purpose was on the horizon and in sight for all of us. They're saying we can accept working in the environment they're in for another 5 years in the knowledge the new build has begun, but we want to be clear it's getting increasingly difficult. We have to empty bathrooms before we offer patients the use that they're meant to be used for, because basically they're used for storage. And certainly I'm aware through family members that there's a consistent thing of having to move stuff from one room in a ward to another to another. There's this constant battle for space. Enough, they say we don't have suitable space to break bad news in private. And what that actually means, let's boil it down. You're either telling somebody that they're dying, or you're going to tell a relative that their close, nearest and dearest are dead. And you're doing that at the moment with the barrier of a plastic curtain in the next bed. And what they say is our priority should be focused on the delivery of care and hands on our patients, not on moving beds and equipment, just so we can deliver the most basic fundamentals of care. And what they've also said is that they have been involved in the design of the new hospital. This has been really exciting work and finally brings together physical and mental health on one site, in a building that affords patients and staff a building that's fit for purpose, that demonstrates investment and the value we all place on health. And how many times, particularly in the last 18 months, have I been asked, are we putting money before lives as part of COVID? And here, this debate, yes, it is worthy of having a debate about money, it's absolutely clear. But our view is that the proposals we're putting in place do work. And therefore, actually, we can put that healthcare at the front and centre of our policies. And actually, yes, it's about all islanders. It is actually also consistent with our objectives of putting children first, as the Health Minister said. I'll briefly, sir, remind members from the clinicians. They talk about the issues around having enough operating theatres to satisfy the demand for surgery. The emergency medical and surgical assessment units will never be co-located with our emergency department. This is obviously if this doesn't happen. We'll never have the mental health or maternity facilities we need. Our radiology and pathology departments will not be able to expand to deliver crucial diagnostic investigations. We will still have to rely on porter cabins to provide outpatient clinics, and our inpatient wards will never have ensuite rooms. That goes back to the bathrooms. We do not have the luxury of further delays. We cannot continue to care for our patients, the people of Jersey, in the current building much longer. What we need is a new hospital. So, in essence, what are the other consequences apart from delay, cost, and in essence wasting yet more money on trying to maintain a slowly failing facility? It's about letting down our staff and our patients. Now, I want to talk about the funding. Let's be clear. The scrutiny advisor clearly states that the market has changed since 2017. I think I was challenged. Why had I changed my mind or my stance on borrowing? Well, actually, said, if one actually goes back and looked at the advisor's comments.
I'm afraid I must interrupt you. There's a point of order raised by Senator Valwa. Senator Valwa?
Yes, thank you, sir. May I raise a point of order with you with regards to the potential of misleading the Assembly? And when I ask this point of order, sir, it's in reference to the argument that this amendment delays.
No, I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. Senator Valwa, a point of order is a point raised on which the chair can make a defining determination. I'm clearly not in a position to make any determination. It is for others to address those matters in their speeches or to raise points of clarification with the Speaker after that's finished.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's unfortunate.
Please continue.
I think, sir, if it helps, when I've talked about delay, I'm basically saying, sir, that the planning application at the moment is scheduled for the 15th of November. If you want to, and as I've said, sir, by essentially restricting the funding ability, the funding envelope, essentially means that the scheme, as envisaged, cannot go to that application process. And therefore, sir, we'll then into a redesign, which then comes back to the functional brief stage, which is basically restarting, which is basically then attempting to get engagement again with clinicians after what has been a very, very thorough process. That's the summary position, sir. What I was going to say, sir, to address the points that about why I had changed my stance, there are two reasons. Well, there's a number of reasons, actually. But to quote the scrutiny advisor, it says, notwithstanding particularly negative comments they've made, bond financing is still considered to be the optimal solution if this level of borrowing is deemed to be required, rather than the previous recommended blended approach. And this is due to market changes since such an approach was recommended in a previous iteration of this project in 2017. There's some other reasons, sir, as well. But Treasury, sir, have clearly demonstrated, and I hope everybody has seen the graph of the red line at the bottom, which is if you take it out the reserves, and the growing lines of projected ranges of what happens to the finances if you leave the reserves reasonably intact. But they've clearly demonstrated that keeping the reserves and by borrowing at historically low rates, it will leave us better off by £1.7 billion. That's on 756 million. So spending out the reserves rather than borrowing, in essence, add to our cost of the project. And if we just illustrate that, we borrow 756 at 2%, that's probably a higher rate than we would hope to get. Let's use that. That costs around £15 million a year. And bear in mind, for example, we've set the challenge, Deputy Sutherland may not like my allusion to this, but we've set the challenge to achieve £20 million of rebalancing and savings every year. So I'm putting that into the context, you may not agree, but I'm putting it into the context of what that amount looks like. So what I'm trying to say, sir, is it's a manageable sum, and that's being funded out of the reserves, doesn't go anywhere near the P&L, if you like, our normal day-to-day expenditure. Now, sir, interesting enough, I came across a quote, actually, from a scrutiny advisor to a certain corporate services scrutiny panel back in 2014, also known as CIPFA. And they actually, at that point, were challenging Treasury's assumptions about the rates of return that Treasury were projecting for 2014, 15, 16 and onwards. And they suggested this should be further tested. Well, sir, I asked, and so those Treasury assumptions were around 5 and up to 6%, just over 6%, depending which year you take. Sir, the returns from 2014 to 2020 have averaged at 7%. So in other words, sir, the CIPFA advice was conservative of that day, and actually Treasury said we think they're being conservative, and Treasury have proved their position. And if we get 7%, for example, if we use that average return on 756 million, that's worth £50 million a year in the context of interest being paid at 15. So we are not proposing to borrow recklessly. There is a plan and it works. And frankly, in my view, alternative options leave us more exposed from risk, leave us less flexibility, and as I've already said, involve the taxpayer giving up huge growth in our reserves, which under our proposals will always be there if they are needed. Now, so I know Deputy Morell, for example, is concerned about risk. And I'm sure he'll speak and I'm sure he'll tell me why I'm wrong. But I think actually, and I think some of us are all guilty about this, by the way, is that Deputy Morell is actually applying his view as an individual on a borrowing pattern. So as an individual, if we take out a mortgage, we generally have to repay it before you retire. There's a fixed time frame. But a company, and in particular a government, can have a far longer time horizon, and that is why what we're proposing, 35, 40 years. That allows us to borrow at really low rates, and again, without putting up taxes. And as I said, I repeat our proposals about saving money. That saves or generates 1.7 billion. Bear in mind, we are meant to be being rational in our decision making. Now, separately, sir, and also a reason for a different approach. And it was identified in another corporate services report, sir. Sorry, sir, I'll say just in case Deputy Morell is picking me up, I'm giving an assumption. I'm sure he'll address where I'm wrong later in his speeches board.
As you raised it, Deputy Morell, you raised a point of order.
Yes, and I apologise, Chief Minister, I don't want to. It's more that I don't know the standing order, but is there a standing order which says you can't imply things which the Chief Minister has no idea what my view on risk or debt is?
You can't.
Because I've not spoken.
The standing order says you can't impute improper motives to someone.
Well, he's impugning some motives which he has no grounds to base that on.
Well, I think you've made that point. There's no ruling to make. The standing order is what it is, imputing improper motives. But it's for you to correct that imputation when you come to speak.
Just intriguing, because I've said nothing.
I'm sure Deputy Morell will come and correct me in the error of my ways when he speaks. But what I was trying to say, sir, is that, and I'm picking on Deputy Morell, I know he has been raising questions during the debate about risk, is around we as individuals apply often our own risk profiles to the decisions we're making. What I'm trying to say as a government we can have a longer time horizon. Now, actually, so the other point is that actually also a recommendation from the then Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, sir, was about looking and recommending to Treasury, and it's accepted actually as a recommendation. I think it was 2017, might have been beginning of 2018, about looking at the current year prior basis of taxation. And at that point, I think we thought it would raise about £280 million, and actually the projections now are about 340 million. So the point is that at that point in time, certainly I felt there were different ways of raising the funds. Now, so we've had COVID. That actually has demonstrated how we can react to stress and how we've been able to flex and deal with a crisis. And actually we've come out of it really, really well. But that COVID debt, sir, and the money raised by the PYB, CYB, depending what point in time you take, the CYB, PYB will raise between £100 and £200 million more than the present projections on COVID debt, depending what point in time you take. In addition, sir, we have got the Creator 7 debt that is referred to in the government plan. And if this Assembly approves that basically refinancing of that existing liability in the first 30 years, that will save the taxpayer £300 million. So not only with Plan A, in terms of working on returns, which actually works on the hospital funding, we've got what I'll call Plan B and Plan C, which will generate between £400 and £500 million extra to go into the reserve to again give, or if you like, I think, improve our financial position. And that, if future assemblies agree, can also be used whichever way they wish, but towards this rather significant capital project. So I'm going to attempt, and I know I've been going for a while, but I hope it's been helpful. I'm going to attempt to address some of the comments that have been made. Actually, I'll leave one. Hopefully, the Deputy St. Peters are going to pick up the Mott MacDonald comments from the Senator in front of me. What I do need to make is around the size of the road and the size, the way the hospital areas have changed. What we're very much focused on, bearing in mind we've lost 2 planning applications, is obviously getting that planning permission. And that's basically making sure eliminating as much risk around that, much planning risk as possible. And so actually, it's about the standards that the planning department laid down, that's as far as I'm concerned, that's the advice we received. For example, about how we get access up there. And obviously, if that condition isn't, if that road isn't of sufficient quality, that would be a ground for rejecting the application. This, I'm being slightly simplistic here, sir. If we look at the size of the hospital, part of that would be down to standards that have changed, and usually that means they've gone up, bigger, for the various areas. And I'm being really, really simplistic because it's something, as I said, trying not to go down to the weeds too much. But for the sake of argument, you're doing, I'm guessing, a dialysis area. There'll be standards now about spacing between patients, the area, the requisite area for the number of people in there, and all those type of things. The point about those standards, sir, is if you are a clinician, particularly in this increasingly litigious world, you will be concerned if somebody dies under your care, to be blunt, and there's a case. I would suspect any decent lawyer would look at the hospital you're operating and say, well, actually, the reason my patient, my client, or the relative of my client died was because actually this hospital didn't comply with the current standards when it was built. So, in other words, where there were issues in the past where attempts were made, I think, to take 15% of circulation spaces and other bits and pieces within the hospital. So that is one of the reasons why that size has got bigger. I've talked about the previous scheme. I don't think we have to go there. I don't think we need that. I think one thing we do need to remember as well, we're not alone in wanting to build a new hospital. There are numbers of hospitals to be built in the UK. And it's one of those things, we consistently delay and stop it and dither, and actually people will go elsewhere because actually there's easier business to get hold of in a market where there's not that many people who build hospitals relatively. I think the other point, sir, and it deals slightly with the overheads and profit calculation, it was tended for. We actually went to the one who had the lowest calculation. But part of that calculation, because in the other patch, for example, the United Kingdom, where a particular contractor can see repeat business coming down the line, they will pitch it at a different level, i.e. cheaper. This is a one-off hospital, sir, for us. And so therefore, you won't get that discount. Now, building costs, sir, which I think was a fundamental one, which both Deputy Gardner and Deputy Ward. Now, Deputy Ward made a comment, sir, around, oh, well, it says that we can build it for £311 million. I think he specifically referred to that. I think Deputy Gardner said the same. It was roughly around that. Well, so the problem is, you've got 311, and this table, I think, is directly in the OBC, sir, which breaks down 311 and contractor contingency and PCSA costs and design professional fees and equipment, reprovisioning of service from overhead else, that's fine, preliminaries. So it's not £311 million. For the sake of arguing, you need a crane build. That's not included in the 311. You need the architect. You need the professionals who put all this together. You definitely need to equip it. So that 311 that was cited by at least two members is just a complete misunderstanding of those costs. And so that is why, sir, we're saying that 550 that this is being capped at, and bear in mind that's total costs, it will be reduced by the existing expenditures that's already been incurred, isn't realistic. And as we said as well, it's clearly the case. It's been a number that's been plucked out of the air. So there is one thing I do need to say, apologies, which I did want to place on the record, on check, which was actually for, basically, I hope the comfort, or for want of a better expression, of the Conotop of St Helier in relation to the Bowls Club. I really want to just say, it is my absolute intention to secure the alternative location for the bowling club prior to commencing the work. It's about as clear as I can be. We need to achieve that. Okay. Now, sir, talked about that. I'll talk about costs, which is where we are. I think, sir, actually, as well about costs. And interesting enough, St Valva will hopefully recall this. We opened the Kennebec School relatively not so long ago. That was £45 million. I think, from what I've been told, most of our school projects prior to that were about 10 million. But I've certainly not heard any objections, even from me, about the massive difference between what we used to do and what we built it to, because that was investing in children, the facilities out there. And I'm sure most members have seen them, but if they haven't, it is really well worth going and visiting. I am trying to make, I'm skipping quite a lot of notes, but actually, Sir, the Council St John will be delighted that I agree with him at one point, which is the state of the building. What our staff presently have to operate in. It's not good. Deputy Gardner actually said there is no free money. Agree with that as well. So that's the choice, by the way. We are very clear. If we don't borrow and we use the reserves, there is a cost to that. It is not free. That cost is the lost return. That difference between the average return of 7% and the likely borrowing costs of probably around 2%. And that's why I'm saying it's 1.7 billion. And sir, I do actually just want to briefly talk to, I think it's Deputy Doublet, Deputy Hegra. I think that's probably it. Deputy Doublet felt what we were, I think it was the Health Minister, was holding a gun to people's heads. That wasn't his intention. I can't speak for the Health Minister, but in my opinion, it wasn't his intention. It was about being honest. It's about saying these are the consequences that without any direction, well, how are we going to reduce this budget down? Because that's what we're being asked to do. In terms of the child development facility, certainly as far as I'm aware, that they have chosen, sir, not to return to the main hospital. and therefore we have 5 years to resolve that problem. But as I understand it, sir, it is their choice. It's not something that we are imposing on them. In terms of staffing, I think it was Senator Ferguson was raising it in one area. We have presently, it may not, maybe in Deputy Hegarah, at the moment in the area she was referring to, we've got 8 vacancies out of 85 FTEs, so we're not understaffed. Some of the delays, I think, in the surgery, so we're around combination of maternity leave and annual leave, sir. Right, I've spent a long time, sir. I apologise for that, but I've tried to address as many of the comments that I've heard to date from members. I make no apologies for reiterating this point, sir, that this is a generational decision that we are facing today. It's the Our Queen's Valley of 2021. And it almost feels like, sir, that actually what we're being asked to do is to build that wall of Queen's Valley, that dam, at a lower height. And you think about that, that's the short-term commitment, the short-term issue versus the long-term issue of the water supply. And for me, I'm absolutely clear, voting for this amendment does cause delay. It therefore causes cost, and we really should be doing it, let alone the morale and impact on our staff. And that's not just the clinicians, but obviously the nurses. And we've had, as I said, a letter from between around 120 and 130 clinicians and nurses. And I'm going to finish, sir, with us reading that last paragraph from the clinicians. We implore you, the state's members, to come together to see the bigger picture, and for the sake of the healthcare needs of this generation and of future generations, please make the right decision to support the current proposal to build at Overdale. Let's do what the silent majority of Islanders want, which is to get on with it and build the new hospital that we desperately need. And I don't think I can put that any more eloquently, sir. I urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Minister, do you give way for points of clarification are asked by the Constable St John and Deputy Ward?
Sir, may I? I'm looking at the time, sir, and I wonder if I may propose the adjournment at this stage.
Any time from 5:30 onwards is normally acceded to without any difficulty. I have one member listed still to speak. I have no doubt there will be others who will wish to speak. It may be that it's been a long day and that members would agree. You propose the adjournment. Is that seconded?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Very well. I'm going to work on the assumption unless someone indicates a strong view that they wish to argue against it.
Sir, Deputy Lewis, I can be finished by 5:30.
Yes, but you're not the only one who wishes to speak, I think, Deputy. So, and Senator Varwa, you said no, sir. Is that no? You don't want the adjournment, or?
No, sir, we still have 6 minutes remaining. If the Minister for Infrastructure is able to do his speech within that time, I think it's sufficient. We have 5:30 as our ending time, so I think we should wait until then.
Well, that's your view. Very well. Is the proposition for the adjournment seconded? Very well. We've heard your view, Senator. Does anyone, Deputy Tadier, do you wish to speak?
I don't wish to add a lengthy comment, so it's just I think we should stay, and I think we've got, if the Minister thinks he can say something in 5 minutes, and it might give us something to reflect on overnight.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, Senator Moore.
I would agree with Deputy Tadier's comments.
Well, does anyone else wish to speak? Deputy Young, this is on the question of an adjournment.
Yes, sir. I've listened very carefully today. I would very much like the opportunity to reflect. I haven't spoken yet. I think trying to rush this important decision through in 6 minutes is not the answer, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the question? Very well. Did you wish to say anything in response, sir?
No, thank you.
Very well. Could we put a vote into the link? Thank you. I asked the greffier to put a vote into the link. The question is whether the Assembly now stands adjourned.
I've already put my computer away. Can I vote orally, please?
You vote pour. You vote to, yes. Yes, that's perfectly all right. I think you're not voting to adjourn because you put your computer away. I think you're voting to adjourn And we wish to express it verbally because you put your computer away. Yes. Very well. The link, I asked the Greffier to open the voting and ask members to link. The vote is on the adjournment now until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Pour is for adjournment. Pour is for the adjournment. How are we doing? Members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the Greffier to close the voting. Could we be quiet, please? The Stakes is still sitting. If we could cut down the background chat, ask the Greffier to close the voting. The vote to adjourn has been adopted. 28 votes for, 13 votes contra, 1 abstention in the link, and a further 5 votes indicated in the chat and 1 on the floor of the Assembly to adjourn. Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.